Committee meeting for April 8th, 2025. If we could please salute the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, good evening, everyone. Welcome to Woburn School Committee. Could the superintendent please call the roll?
Mr. Austin.
Present.
Ms. Chisholm.
Here.
Ms. Cormier.
Present.
Mr. Lipset. Present. Mr. Morenin.
Present.
Ms. Wetzel.
Present.
Ms. Crowley.
Present. All right, we're all accounted for. We're moving on to the consent agenda. Do I have any action?
Motion to approve consent agenda.
Second. Any discussion on that motion? All in favor? Aye. The ayes have it. That passes. City Council liaison to the school committee. Is Mr. Viola here this evening? I'm not seeing him in the audience. That's fine. President Dillon is here. Would you like to report to the committee in your capacity?
Good, thank you.
Nice to see you, President Dillon. Moving on, I do not see a student representative for this evening. That is okay. So moving on to reports and presentation of superintendent and staff. The first item on the agenda is, in fact, redistricting. So tonight, I anticipate that the committee will review the recommendations that came to the committee from the caregiver group who carefully audited the maps and gave their input on the ongoing map drafts. And tonight, the committee will review those. I do not anticipate any official action on those maps, but we will certainly clarify a timeline on which we will be finalizing the maps and voting on them. So with that being said, I will pass it over to Dr. Crowley. I also want to note that public participation on this agenda is occurring after the presentation on the maps, so that it was a little bit better flow of information so you can know what you're commenting on. But we will not limit what the content of public participation is. So it's just by way of convenience and transparency occurring after the presentation by superintendent and staff. Okay, that's a lot of words. Dr. Crowley, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. First of all, thank you, everybody, for being here. Looking forward to sharing out a lot of the redistricting updates that we've tried to be transparent and rapid to get to the public. I'm going to go through the first couple slides and then turn it over. We have our consultant here, Priya Sankalia, who's here tonight as well, and so she will also be joining the presentation. So you have these slides, but I'm just going to talk through some of the realities. Okay, why are we here? It doesn't say it on this slide. We're here because we're out of space, specifically at the elementary level. We've been looking at this issue for multiple years. In 2019, in the fall of 2019, we moved preschool classes, 2 preschool classes from the Shamrock to the Reeves, and we constructed the preschool playground out in front of the Reeves. And so we've known that the growing ECP program has posed a problem. The number of ECP classrooms, we have 9 now at the Reeves and 4 at the Shamrock. And so that number has grown significantly just over the past few years. The last time Woburn redistricted was over 30 years ago. If I'm accurate, Ms. Chisholm, you can correct me, 1989 maybe was the last time that there was a redistrict. And it is recommended by people that you look at these things every year, really, but no more than 10 years. And so it's time that Woburn does this. We did this last year. We looked at this last year, as everybody knows, and we'll talk about some of the learnings from last year and how we've applied that to this year. But one of the things that it just says needs of the students have changed. Since 2020, even since COVID, anyone that's been in a school or in a classroom can tell you that things look and feel different. 25% of our students have IEPs, individual ed plans. 15% of our kids are multilingual. Over 50% of our kids are high needs. what the day in the life of a teacher and staff looks like today is a lot different than it was years ago. And so while you see capacity numbers at a certain percent, not all students are equal. So 20 students in a class doesn't mean that all 20 need the same thing. The needs are significantly different. I say this during budget time, but I'm saying it here too because we're trying to solve for the realities of today's students. I alluded to the growing ECP program. Dr. Ryan has talked about this a little bit. There's information included in the packet relative to the numbers of students in our ECP program. Our enrollment last year went up 8% and continues to go up. We're one of the few local districts that the number of students attending has increased. It's a trend in Woburn. Obviously, we are working side by side with the city and appreciate the city's help in trying to identify when different new developments will come online so we can plan accordingly. This, again, we've been doing this for multiple years. We had a working group back, I think, was it before COVID, when we were working with the city inspector, Tom Quinn. 2021. Some principals, Ms. Young, transportation. So we've been looking to try to anticipate when things would open so that we can enroll students accordingly. Unfortunately, what we have is an imbalance at certain elementary schools. Not all schools are imbalanced. And before I go further, I want to say this. We have 7 elementary schools. We have 7 elementary principals actually here tonight. We have 7 great elementary schools. And so I need to say that because I feel really, really it's important for the community to know that the 7 elementary schools are all doing a great job. They may look different, they may feel different, but having the privilege of going in and out of every one of them, I can tell you that the staff at all of the schools, the students, are doing amazing things. And I just want to say thank you to the principals, but thank you to the staff. Again, it's a credit to the flexibility of the principals at the Harold Wyman. I see Miss Maloney here. I'm going to quote you. She has the all-day buffet because her school happens to be more crowded, so it has to run multiple lunches. Ms. Patrici's done the same thing at the Goodyear. So the flexibility that the leadership at the school and the staff at the school have demonstrated to make this work is a credit to the administrator working in collaboration with the teachers. So one of the issues that we're trying to solve for equitable learning environments so that all students have the same exposure to the curriculum, but also to the specials that are provided. And one of the things that we've done, and I alluded to it right out of the gate, was we're moving piecemeal some of our most vulnerable students. So when we're moving 2 preschool classes or 3 preschool classes or the SOAR program, we're moving our most vulnerable students to solve for a space problem. And that, again, is the predicament. We are out of space. And so I just want to set context. Our goal tonight is really just for the school committee to hear an update regarding the 2 maps that were sent to you for consideration by the most recent advisory committee. Before I go any further, I want to just go pause because there's been a few people that have been part of this process, and I'm going to walk through this, but this process slide matters, and we've started this process a couple years ago. The school committee undertook this last year, and so we committed to trying to do it again this year, and here we are. Last spring, an ECP task force was formed, and so Ms. Wetzel chaired that task force, and feel free to speak through it. I'll just go through the... You also chair the resource subcommittee. There's also a working group that's composed of Ms. Young, Dr. Ryan, myself, a couple of the principals, transportation and data accountability person, that we work in conjunction with the consultant, Sanborn consultant. The advisory committee has been formed this year. That is also an incredibly important part of the process. And again, Mr. Lipset, Ms. Wetzel are a part of that. And I think it also expanded to include a parent rep or a caregiver representative from every school, and to allow people to see and be part of this process. The advisory committee meets, and then we make adjustments predicated on what the feedback that they give with Sanborn. Sanborn then works with us to push it to the school committee, and we call it an iterative feedback loop. And you see the arrows going both ways, because again, it's not coming from one place, it's coming from multiple places and multiple voices. So I don't know if anyone here wants to talk further about the process slide.
I think you covered it well.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay. So I think at this time, Priya, you can just give me the head nod, and I'll move the slide for you.
I'm just going to move them here so that I can see here. So yeah, good evening, everyone. I'm jumping in the middle. Thanks, Matt, for that introduction. I think everything that Dr. Crowley said is really appropriate, and I just want to also right off the bat start off by saying that this has been an incredibly thorough and diligent process. We've worked with many school districts in the last several years, and they've been all kinds of school districts, and we've done a lot of, I think, great work working with them in the most transparent way to keep the community informed. But this has been something else. I really want to commend all of you for the work that everyone's done. So just to dive right into the timeline, we started working with Woburn schools in Jan, and I'll be going over these steps again through the presentation, but right off the bat, we did a lot of data gathering. We had a kickoff meeting. And January and February, we thank you. And in January and February, we did a lot of work with the working group and met with the advisory committee once, doing a lot of the initial work of component building, options and revising them, and scenarios. Again, everything that I'll be explaining down the line. In March, we had a couple more advisory committee meetings. We presented options to the school committee on the 26th of March. And then in April, we again met with the advisory committee, presented proposed scenarios to the school committee, and that's today. So that sort of brings us to today, and we are on track. This is what we've been sharing right from the start of this project, that we'll have it all done by the end of April, and implementation will be in May. So I think it's gone pretty well, despite the fact that we've done this in a very iterative process of bringing everything back to the advisory committee and keeping the school committee informed all along the way. Okay, next slide. I have presented this slide before at the last school committee meeting, but so I'll just quickly scan through it. But there are very clear stakeholders in this whole process, and each of them has a clear role. These were all mentioned in the process slide, but we are the ones who are coordinating a lot of the sort of the work, but it's the working group that is coordinating with the advisory committee and with the school committee and with the larger Woburn community. The advisory committee, essentially reviews a lot of the work that we do, gives us feedback. There are representatives of the school community in that advisory committee. and essentially supports recommendations from the working group. The school committee is, of course, key. They're the decision-making entity. They are ones responsible for creating the guiding principles that we'll be talking about, and then, of course, voting on the best option. And then finally, you as the Woburn community, the larger community, of course, maintaining awareness of the process and keeping in touch with what's going on is key. But just my instinct from listening to you all, I think everybody acknowledges the issues that are there, like what Woburn is facing, and it's really commendable to the community to understand what's going on. Okay, the next slide. I just wanted to talk about the guiding principles. This is sort of the first step in redistricting, where the guiding principles are kind of what form the foundation of redistricting. You have a problem, but you need to know how to go about solving it and what is a priority in that community. So, the school committee took a crack at creating these guiding principles. They take the lead on this. And I believe community feedback surveys were also used, and there was a lot of school committee discussion. The school committee came up with a draft guiding principles, and then they prioritized them and finally landed on the guiding principles that we are actually using to do this entire process. I don't know if anybody in the school committee wants to comment any more on this, but just to give you a sense of where these came from and what the process was. It was thoughtful and went through a lot of steps before we landed on the guiding principles that we are using. What is also key about the guiding principles, you will see them on the next slide, is that they tend to sort of work against each other intrinsically, as you can imagine. When you are trying to minimize impact on families, it's going to be in opposition to class size equity. If you are looking for demographic equity, it's going to be in opposition to the distance from the school, because as you can imagine, demographics, like certain people will be living in a certain place. So if you want equity, it's going to be really, you're going to have to balance one priority against the other. So that's what we're working with, and you have to develop scenarios and options that meet all these priorities, but at the same time sort of juggle them to see, okay, in this scenario, what's more important? How can we make it work? So it's certainly challenging. So the next slide actually shows you what these guiding principles are, and they are listed to some extent in priority. So class size equity in all schools is really a high priority. Equity in the demographics, especially for high need students. Maintaining sub-separate programs in the current buildings is a very sensitive issue. Of course, neighborhood schools, because that's really important. And then as little disruption as possible. So as you can see, like I explained in the previous slide, they work against each other, but you still have to keep them as your guiding principles as you do this process. Okay, the next slide basically talks about the process, and this is sort of step 2. So step 1 is guiding principle development. Step 2 is the redistricting process, and within this we have a whole bunch of other steps. The first one, of course, is data gathering and processing. We geocoded all the student locations. We got an understanding of the problem. We set up our workflows. The second step is we actually build components, and all of this I will be going into further detail on. And then you build these options that you are looking at, and then you evaluate them. Like, what is it that's, what option is good, what is not good, why is it so, what should we keep, what should we throw out, how should we change it. All of that is done using the guiding principles. And then, of course, the final step is this, providing you with this presentation, giving you an opportunity to look at what we've come up with and providing comments. Okay, so to dive a little deeper into the process, these are just some maps of Woburn, as you can see, with the students geocoded. Now, when we share maps, we don't put the students on there because of the sensitivity of the location. So this is just giving you a very high-level representation of the students. Where are the schools? What are the current school district lines? So So all of that is done in that first step to understand what the information is, and also get the student demographics. So when we get the enrollment information, we also get all the demographic information along with that, which is all mapped to the district. The next slide talks about component building. Now, this is a really important piece of the process. We spent quite a bit of time on this, and as you can imagine, because we created a lot of components. Components, as if you can think of them as puzzle pieces or building blocks, are what we use for doing the redistricting. So if anybody's familiar with legislative redistricting, when we create legislative districts, you use census blocks. But with school redistricting, you can't use census blocks because census blocks are not defined by where students are. So that's why you have to create these components, and that is the process that we spend quite a bit of time on. These are done collaboratively. We worked with the working group, which had of course, folks who live in town, who know the district really well, the transportation coordinator, who is also very familiar with streets and neighborhoods. And you'll see, we created just a slew. I think they're like, what is it, 40 components? I'd ask them to put the number, but I guess
67.
67. There you go. 67 components. So, and in all of this, there's always when you look at these maps, you'll notice that there's always the alphabet is essentially the school, and then there's numbering after that. And the first component is always sort of the main one, which is where the school is. So that's typically not touched. And that's how we create the components. So they're labeled with their current school district and the number. And all components are not the same, as Dr. Crawley mentioned. Some, in fact, like M14 doesn't have any students at all. But just so that we could make everything contiguous, we created that one. And there are some components that are very small because it's dense. Like there are lots of parts of Woburn that are so dense. So some of them are very small, some of them are very big, because what made sense from a neighborhood perspective, what made sense from giving us more flexibility to create the districts. The next slide goes into a little more detail on how we paid close attention to the neighborhoods and natural boundaries when we were creating these components. Any main roads, if there were neighborhoods, then go to the back of the parcel so that students who are living on the same street and are might be going to the same school, you don't want to separate them. So we kind of tried to be really conscious about that and looked at the map in a lot of detail. So I just want to emphasize that these components were created very deliberately. It was not just somebody just chopping off the district. It was very deliberate. Okay, so the next slide, 67 components. You see how the road, like where we might have created the lines based on existing districts and roads and any natural features, waterways or any transportation features were all considered when we created these components. Okay, there's a lot. I'm going to go through a lot, so taking a moment. The next step, of course, is then once you have these components, you have to think about options. Now, options are essentially different permutations of of school, grade, and programming permutations. So we created 13 different options of these permutations. And then for each option, so say, I'm just going to throw one out, ECP in a particular school. If you decided to go that way, then you'd have to create all these scenarios based on that option. So in the end, we created 32 scenarios, which is, I think, by far the most that I've created in the 10 years that I've been doing school redistricting. So a lot of scenarios for each option were built so that you could sort of evaluate all of those options and see what makes sense. The next slide gives you a summary of those options that we looked at. So we looked at ECP to modulars. We looked at ECP in every elementary school. What would it look like if we moved ECP to any of the elementary schools? What would it look like if we had RISE 2 in various schools? And then finally, we landed on redistricting with ECP and programs in existing schools, so essentially just redistricting as it is right now. And then this phased approach to ECP in a separate space, which is the option that was voted on, which we will be presenting further to you today. The next slide sort of, says that a little more. When we last presented to the school committee, we showed you two options. One was, this long-term map where the end map would be what would be adopted for an eventual ECP space. And the second option was redistricting right away. So, you would have new lines in September 2025, which would very likely end up with changes very soon. So the school committee voted on option 1, and that is what we are going to be presenting to you today. Okay. Again, this is just to give you context. These are the current elementary schools, students and districts. A lot of information if you haven't looked at this before. Several of you have been in this process, so are familiar with this, but these are the numbers. We break down everything by capacity, and I'll talk about capacity in a little bit, but by grade, and also we look at everything by average class sizes and by the demographics. So, what is the percentage of multilingual learners, the special ed, low income in every school. So, just so you understand, when we make any changes with the components, all of these numbers keep changing. So, and of course, we are looking at it as a snapshot of the current students. So, how do you then find that best match given your guiding principles? Okay, so just a quick additional slide on the scenario evaluation process. We look at all of these scenarios that we built against the guiding principles. We have the map, we have the components, we have all of this data, and then we use the guiding principles and sort of use this table to score each of these scenarios and said, okay, how do they stack up? Some of them are really poor on all of them, all the guiding principles. So or really high on one and really low on the other. So those were not, either we looked at them, we considered them, and we moved on because they just didn't work. So guiding principles helped us to look at the pros and cons of each scenario, and how do you prioritize it, and how do you then, which option bubbles up to the top. Okay, I think that's...
We're going to tag team off.
Yes, we're going to tag team.
Yes, you're not done yet. All right. So what we wanted to talk about before going into the maps that kind of we're going to look at more deeply is just kind of around. Well, some maps met the criteria. There are kind of many reasons that maps may not have been brought forward as the most viable. And so those are the ones that were the viable maps are the ones that we'll look into. So with this map, map 5. While it on the guiding principles was a map, and again, we sent out prior just so that you could see the map in more detail that we were looking at, that while it met the guiding principles, some of the concerns of this map were, so for example, on why a map that may not have moved forward, is that when you had in the phased map G10 moved into the Shamrock, and there were no components moving out of the Reeves, we would not be able to fit ECP between the two buildings. Additionally, based off of the number of students in the phased map that would still be at the Harold Wyman, as well as now the Reeves having more students, we would not be able to split RISE 2 only between the two buildings. So it's just a few examples of how there's kind of many different factors that brought the maps forward. And so while the guiding principles are the first part, and the maps that you're looking at today are the ones that were the most viable that fit the guiding principles, there's kind of multiple factors that we're looking at as a whole. Additionally, just as kind of just for context for the committee, we also did look at transportation, and this map for map 5 had substantially higher number of students that would be eligible for busing, meaning that we were looking at kind of what are some of the other kind of components to maps that we were considering. So again, when we met with the advisory committee and we kind of decided what maps to bring forward, we thought that this was a good map as well to kind of bring to light that while many maps kind of at face value and look at like really desirable, that there's many reasons kind of underneath that a map may not actually be viable for us to look at. And so if you want to go to the next slide, these are the side-by-side of the two kind of rating charts. And again, I think there's a lot of nuances to this, and this is really kind of a snapshot. We'll go through the different maps and kind of the rationale for how, kind of why they were built, kind of what the different changes might be, but that I think ultimately there are pros and cons that we'll talk about, but I also think there's pros and cons that you might find. The pros and cons that the advisory committee had, you know, might not necessarily be the pros and cons as you see it, as well as kind of as we hear from the community. So recognizing we're kind of giving you a snapshot, we're talking through the different maps, we're kind of talking about how they go against the guiding principles, but recognizing like this is very nuanced, and so this is really just our kind of our take. So with the two maps, you'll see that they emerged as our class size equity on both of them were at a high. The demographic equity for both maps we listed as a medium, because at the end maps, they both met and would be considered kind of high meeting in terms of equitable distribution. But during the phase process, there are buildings that dip before you kind of get to that ideal number. And so we felt to be, again, transparent is that they're not going to be a perfect hit in the phased approach. However, the maps both were kind of at the top of the list in terms of at the end maps having us have ideal equitable distribution. In terms of sub-separate programs in current building, both of the maps keep programming where they are. However, again, we'll go into how that looks a little bit different in each. And then the neighborhood schools, again, is at a medium. And I think just as kind of as a reference to all of the maps, and again, we mentioned it at a previous meeting, but that when we are not creating more space in either of these maps, and so when we are keeping ECP contained within our current buildings, and not having ECP in a separate space, we can only make the maps kind of as clean as we want, right? We recognize that making maps kind of in this existing phase, as well as making a phased long-term plan in which we're not moving students more than once, that we're not creating as clean a maps. Again, that was really what the rationale was for looking for space for ECP now, was to be making clean maps from the start. So just kind of to an overall that like they're only going to be so clean when we're working within the parameters that we have. And then within the minimizing of disruption, again, I'm going to go back to Mr. Lipson in terms of how we want to define that word. So we have used it in terms of numbers. The first number is the number of students that would move in the phase for September. And the second number is the number of students that would move in the end map. One of the kind of point of reference that the Sanborn talked about when we were talking about this is also thinking about the difference between the starting number and the ending number in terms of kind of what that might look like in terms of the need for movement along the way. All right. And so I will pass it back. Peter will talk through the different scenarios, but when we get to the next slide, I can talk about capacity. You had mentioned it, so
right. Yeah. So this first scenario, I'm just going to sort of, the phased approach does those little shifts. You'll see that G8, L3, and L4 move to Alta Vista. It's sort of cleaning up some of that discontinuous nature up there, and then A4, which is already sort of a little flexible on its assignment, is partially to Linscott, and then H11, which will eventually go to Malcolm White, is the first step. So like the first phase, those are the changes that we are proposing in this scenario. And of course, the end map, as you can see, there'll be significant other changes, and of course, these will happen along the way. but a couple of Malcolm White components going to Goodyear, the ones that are along the Goodyear edge, and then M3, M4, M7, and L2 from Linscott going to Hurl-Wyman. So we're trying to sort of see how we can reduce that pressure in Hurl-Wyman. And H9 and H10 go to Malcolm White. And in this one, G10 does go to Shamrock. And then the whole bunch of those Hurl-Wyman components that go to Reeves. So that's essentially what is happening in scenario 3, which is, you can see the phased approach, what will happen in September, and then where it's going eventually.
Could I ask a brief clarifying question?
Yes, Mr. Lipset?
Thank you. I appreciate it. A4 has lines on it. I wonder if you might be able to explain to the committee and public what that means.
Sure. So we discussed this again at the last advisory committee. There have been A4 right now is currently in the Alta Vista. It has shifted between the Alta Vista and Linscott over the past few years. So one of the conversations that we have had is around that being based off of enrollment at the Linscott and the Alta Vista, having the ability to district that to either building, and that is something that follows past practice. And so in the maps, it had been districted as Linscott. However, we had talked about the flexibility. And again, depending on which of the two maps is decided, we'll look at the final numbers and make that decision for September.
Thank you. I just want to make sure people didn't think that was a printing error or something like that, but that was...
We just added stripes for fun.
Yeah, why not?
Make it focal.
So in terms of capacity, I've spoken about this before. When we're talking about capacity, we're talking about kind of two numbers. The percentage that's on the screen or on the slide deck is talking about the capacity in terms of number of students based off of the number of classrooms. And then we know that one of the kind of the concerns that we have is not only the number of students, but in some buildings it's really capacity as it relates to space capacity in buildings. And so while, for example, in the current map, if we were looking, that the Hurl-Wyman looks like it has like average class size and percentage looks right, it's working off of 21 classrooms when the Hurl-Wyman is set to be 18 classrooms. And so thinking about the space capacity is a much higher percentage than the student capacity. And so when we're looking through these options, we're looking at both of those capacity percentages. And again, you've had those in the past and they should also be provided for you again, but we're looking at both. So if you want to keep going, this is just the end map, the phase map. Again, you'll see the impacted total number of students in this phase, the impacted current fourth grade students, so we've talked about rising fifth graders. And then on the next slide.
Just a quick note on the end map, those numbers that Courtney mentioned were basically if you did that in 2025, that's the number of students that would be impacted. So that 521 is like you using the current students, that's what the number would be. Sorry, go ahead.
No, you're good. And again, this is, I think there's a lot of kind of pros and cons to each of the map, kind of just the general conversations on each of them. And so overall, again, both maps that are being considered are maps that really look at class size equity and are maps that we rated high. Again, the medium around demographic equity, the end map does a really great job of that, but recognizing that there are some places in which you would see the dip during the phased portion. Sub-PEPFAR programs would be staying in their current buildings. And so just for reference, in the phased map scenario 3, there would be 4 ECP classrooms at the Shamrock. The remaining 1 Rise 2 classroom that's there now would stay, and the remaining at the Hurl-Wyman, and then the 10 ECP classrooms at the Reeves. One of the reasons that this map had emerged as one of the top to come through was it was having more students districted to North Woburn, which we know is one of the factors that we put important when considering looking at building projects. And this map has the least number of students moved for this upcoming school year. One of the things to note around the map is that there are no components that move out of the Reeves during the phase process or the end map, there's no Reeves components that would be moving out. This had been talked about previously around option 1, which was the concern about space, and if we needed to relieve space over what we is kind of an unknown phase period of time, that was one of the things that we would have to potentially look at. That's one of the reasons we discussed that there have been kind of new components drawn. However, none of those components in this map are phased out, so we would have to go back and look at that over time, as well as the south end portion, which is why it's really kind of one of the bigger differences between 3 and 6, is remaining split between 3 different buildings, is kind of still splitting that one section of the community. Again, if there's a lot of other pieces, we're happy to walk through, but that's it overall.
Okay, so in this scenario 6, essentially it addresses what Courtney just mentioned, is relieving the pressure and Reeves next year. So, if that is something that is impending, then this would help that issue. And because we had to do that, we created those additional components at Reeves, giving us the flexibility of creating these scenarios. So now in this one, of course, in the phased approach, North Woburn, mostly the same as scenario 3, except L2 remains in Linscott. G8, G9, L3, and L4 to Alta Vista, so all of those changes next year. A4, the same as the previous scenario, and then M2 and M5 to Goodyear. And also R2 to Hurl-Wyman, and then all of those Hurl-Wyman components in the center would be going to Malcolm White. So H2, H3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 to Malcolm White, and G10 to Shamrock. So as you can see, to relieve the pressure at Reeves, there's a lot of other movements that needed to be made, and that's what this does. Mm-hmm.
We're looking to the map here.
Yeah. Isn't that what
Yes, no, I didn't know. We stopped on the last one, so I was making sure before we moved on. So the impact of students on the NREF is 556, and if we go to the phase 337 for September, and again, that thinking about the movement now, it's more movement, students moving, but the difference between the starting number of movement and the end number is smaller. Again, that's a preference part, but just to note. And then the impact of total current fourth graders is at 51. And so if we go to the next slide, again, class size equity. The second bullet talks about that, again, there should be one more sentence to that one, but demographic equity in the phase and the end map are slightly better than in scenario 3. However, in the phase map, both maps, which is why they're rated at medium, there is a dip in kind of the equity portion of it before the end map in which it levels off. This map, again, the rationale for kind of looking at the components at the Reeves was looking at ways in which we could be making room for the ECP at the Reeves, including the ability to move some ECPs from the Shamrock if needed. And so this is thinking about kind of how the different buildings are really kind of interconnected in terms of like when we do one thing to one building, it kind of has a domino effect as we look forward. And so again, when
Courtney,
we're
I'm
looking
sorry,
at...
can I just ask you a question before I forget it?
Yeah.
Do you mean you're planning for potential movement of the ECP from the Shamrock to the Reeves, not to a third building?
I'm going to say it. Yes.
Thank you.
You got it.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just wanted to
Nope.
make sure.
Please, absolutely. It's a lot of information.
Okay.
Yes. And so when we're looking at the components of the Reeves, again, going back to our guiding principles, I think it's important to remember that when we're drawing the maps, we're drawing off of class size equity and demographics. And so when we're looking at the components and how we're moving them out of the different buildings, that's a big piece of looking at not only kind of to the student numbers and kind of the distribution, but what components are also kind of in the end going to be making our buildings have kind of equity. And so I'm just, when looking at the movement from the Reeves, the R2 component when we were moving was allowing us to have G10 move into the Shamrock because if we needed to move, create space, we have created the space at the Reeves to move the ECP. And we can't move G10 into the Shamrock unless we have space for some of our ECP classrooms to go. And so in this scenario 6 map, we will have, going the wrong direction, 2 ECPs would stay at the Shamrock, and those would be the Rise 1 ECPs that would stay going vertical alignment into programming, and there would be 12 that would be at the Reeves. And again, that's because we've created the space at the Reeves to do so. This map also has more students in North Woburn, and our end map, again, are one of our goals. This is splitting the south end a little bit less in the end map. Again, when we're kind of talking around the neighborhood school component, just a consideration. Most students are moved in the phased map with a smaller difference in the end map. And again, this other bullet is not necessarily to go into a larger conversation here. It's just one of the comments that has been made around the maps is that the way that the lines are drawn in 6 could potentially provide us with long-term planning. One of the things we talk a lot about is that we can't predict the future and we can't predict the growth. And so this provides the ability for us to make maybe some regionalized considerations as the way, in the terms of the way that the lines are. That's not necessarily something that has to happen. It's just a way that the lines look in this map that you can do. And again, we mark it all as a medium in terms of neighborhood schools, separate programmings, programs stay. And in this map, Rise 2 would stay 1 classroom at the Shamrock still in the phased approach with the rest at the Hurl alignment. And to answer your question, we are not looking to have ECP go to any buildings other than the buildings they currently are in. So that's one of the parts is that if we are going to be kind of adding any students to the Shamrock, we need to make sure that the Reeves is able to have programming.
Thank you, Assistant Superintendent.
Sure.
And I apologize for not calling you by your title earlier.
It's okay.
Thank you.
It's all right. All is good.
I
Okay.
realized that I did miss describing the end map, so I apologize for that. So it's like-
Okay.
So I think I just want to finally say that, I mean, I know that you'll close up, but we will be putting together an interactive map, a story map that everybody can go to and sort of, look at the changes on a more, I know these maps are very high level and you can't quite see the detail, so we will be putting that together, and that the survey, when that goes out, it will have a link for that map. So.
Great.
And so we anticipate the survey going out later this week. The public forum that we've alluded to is scheduled for April 28th at 6 p.m. at the high school in the auditorium. And then there'll be a remote option for the it says public survey, but it should say public forum remote via Zoom, and that will also be at 6 p.m. on the 29th. And then ultimately, the school committee has a scheduled meeting on April 30th.
April 30th.
So that's the timeline.
Thank you, Dr. Crowley. Okay, so committee members, are there any questions?
Do we want to hear from the public?
Would you like to hear public comment
Yeah,
first?
I think so.
Okay, thank you, Vice Chair Chisholm. So I'm hearing the will of the committee is to open it up to public participation at this point. So is there anyone, would the committee given that this is a contested issue, would the committee like to waive the 3-minute time limit, or would it like to proceed? I'm at your behest.
Motion that we waive the 3-minute time?
I have a motion to waive the 3-minute time limit on
Second.
public comment. I have a second. Is there any discussion on that motion? All in favor? Aye. The ayes have it. We will now proceed without a 3-minute time limit on public participation. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to come before the committee? So the guidelines for public participation are as follows. You are being recorded. If you speak, you're consenting to be being recorded. Please state your name and technically you're supposed to state your address. We don't have a 3-minute time frame, but please refrain from any direct attacks on Woburn Public Schools.
Committee.
My name is Michelle Delaney. My husband and I have owned a home and paid the insane city taxes for the last 10 years at 35 Sheridan Street, one house down from the path behind the old Herald. We could see it through the woods. We moved there when I was pregnant with our rising 5th grader and loved the fact that there was a community school across the street. Fast forward to 2018, 3 years later, it was closed, merged, and abandoned until 2025, when it was torn down last month. A community park splash pad's going in. This park has been in the works since 2021, when the city had its first public meeting. 4 years ago, and still probably another 2 more to go. The Clap, where I attended K through 5, was another school that was closed, merged, and abandoned for many years until it was turned into another community splash park, which took years of planning. And you're gonna redistrict the schools and inconvenience hundreds of kids and families in less than 5 months? It just absolutely blows my mind. We understand that you want to do what's best for the community. However, many parents want what's best for what's their children's interest. We have a 4-year-old that will be entering the school system in 2 years, on the final year of the phased approach. Honestly, I think there's going to be major problems with redistricting, which will be still going on in 2 years. If these aren't ironed out, we'll be looking into private schools for our 4-year-old. We don't ever want to deal with this again. Our youngest deserves to go where her big sister went. Please don't consider scenario 3. H9 in the Sheridan community deserves to stay at the Harold Wyman, our community school. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Is there anyone else in the audience that would like to come and speak before the committee? Hello, good evening.
Hi. So I just want to start. I speak very loud, so if I get
It's okay.
so loud voice. My name is Katie. I am one of the parents of the G8 students, right currently at the Goodyear. I had the opportunity to speak to a lot of members at the committee. I want to start off with my child. I can only speak for my child at the moment. He was already redistricted back in 2022 from the Alta Vista to the Goodyear. It was a hard transition for my son, who currently suffers anxiety and depression, especially transition issues. So, handling that situation. Right now, I want to speak in behalf of, first, 2 things. The opportunity he's had at the Goodyear has been spectacular with the therapist help that, unfortunately, Alta Vista does not currently have. We waited 2 long years for this opportunity to open up for us. I fear that as a mother who has worked a lot with the Goodyear to find assistant outpatient therapy that comes directly to the school, that currently does not does not go to Alta Vista, as I've already done my research and worked with them, in terms of the redistricting happens from Goodyear to Alta Vista. And unfortunately, we would lose all of our IEP, outpatient therapists, and school counseling that he is currently having right now. I fear that that would be a tough transition, not only for my child, but it would also affect him emotionally and educationally. His academic will, seems to be right off the edge, as well as it is something that the school will be overcrowded, the classes will be overcrowded, especially with, in the near future, construction could potentially happen, as this was one of the main reasons he was redistricted back in 2022, because there was a new building being built, and there were expectations that more students would be attending the Alta Vista. And I feel right now that G8, which is Avalon and Avalon 120, would be affected going to the Alta Vista. The schools will be crowded. If this construction happens in the near future, the kids will be redistricted again. And potentially this would be the 3rd time my son would have that transition, affecting him, again, emotionally, mentally, and academically. I want to mention also that I did reach out to some of the community members in terms of what are the likelihood of this happening. I know it's quite high. I know we're working on what's best for the community. We're working on the growth because Woburn is up and coming. It's a lot of buildings, students, families are coming in. Completely understand that. I want to mention that I do understand that. I am fully aware of how that works. I come from a city that had the same situation. I moved to Woburn due to the amazing education opportunities my son was offered here. And it is quite disappointing of working hard with Woburn Public Schools to get the help he needed for us to then, again, not have that opportunity. My biggest concern is the third redistricting that could potentially happen in the near future, in the year, possibly in a year or two, because I know Linscott and Alta Vista would eventually combine, as that is an opportunity, a potential opportunity that would happen. The classes will be overcrowded, and that also jeopardizes all students' education ability. It is a hard transition. It's not only happened to my son, but also to his class, meaning the class he would be graduating with that started with him at the Alta Vista and transitioned over a good year at the Avalon building. I want to speak in regard to our district specifically. I want to, I know there's no potential answer at the moment, but in the near future, what is this, like, this is in the best interest of the community or for the students? I want us to retouch that. We want to make sure that if we appeal and we offer the opportunity to have our kids stay at one specific school, what are the chances that would be approved? I was denied once for that opportunity. I don't want to have that denied again, especially since it took us 2 years to finally have the therapy he needed at the school with this. I did speak to his counselor at the school. I do have letters for that. I want to know what, all the sacrifice I did as a mother to make sure my son is good in school, has the best education, has the best upbringing in Woburn. Is that just going to go down the drain? And that would be very disappointing because, again, I want to mention that I came from a different city. Back in 22, he started kindergarten in a different city. And the reason I chose Woburn was the amazing academic the academics you guys have here. The amazing education you guys are able to provide. I can't speak for other parents because I can't speak on behalf of G8, but I can speak for my son and I can advocate for him. So I wanted to raise that concern.
Thank you. Thank you for doing that.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Is there anyone else in the audience that would like to come to speak before the committee? Hello.
Hello. Thank you all.
Of course.
I want to start off with, we know this is not an easy feat. We know there's been a lot of work put into this, but since you're opening for public comment, here I am. Good evening. My name is Brooke Noonan, and this is my husband, Chris. We're the parents of 3 young boys, and we live on Banner Drive, right next to the Hurled School. We used to be able to throw a rock and hit it before it was knocked down. We understood that when purchasing a home, that our neighborhood school would be the Hurled Wyman, and we were so excited because we already knew that we'd have built-in friends, as our friends that we have been made for over a decade were sending their kids there too. My oldest is currently in 1st grade at Hurled Wyman, and he's thriving there. Even while navigating the challenges of ADHD and some anxiety, the support we've received from the school has been incredible. They have him on a 504 plan, and I always know he has someone in his corner. And we know, and Ms. Maloney knows, he doesn't come without difficulty, but they've been able to see the best in him. And I couldn't imagine sending him anywhere else. They've embraced him and worked with us to create a space where he feels safe and successful. Up until now, we've tried to shield him from the uncertainty surrounding the redistricting, but as parents, we can't ignore it anymore. It's been stressful and unclear this whole time. At one point or another, we could have landed at 4 different schools, and we just can't make sense of it anymore. We understand there's complexities, but I can't help feeling lost and full of questions with the proposed outcomes. We're just one set of parents speaking about our own children, but I can promise you we're not the only ones confused. Everyone we talk to, especially from age 9, and many are here today, are trying to understand what's going on, and frankly, we're starting to lose trust in the process. I now feel that with the phased approach, I can't help but feel that there's something that's going to be hanging over our heads for years to come. And we know that this is, the second round of redistricting that we've had to do in 2 years. The longer term planning, we have more questions on. Are we moving when the ECPs are built and ready? Are we moving every year? There's just a lot of questions out there. We're not asking for perfection, we're asking for answers, and we need clarity on what's happening and when it's happening so we can best prepare our children, especially those who need consistency, routine, and a strong support system to succeed. Please take a thoughtful look at the neighborhoods where redistricting will cause the most disruption. Again, I'm speaking on behalf of my children, but I know I've had similar conversations with a lot of families in age 9. We can't imagine going to another school and the logistics that would send us to the Malcolm White from a busing standpoint, after school care, and just taking us out of our neighborhood school. Again, not just lines on a map, it's about our families and about our kids, some who need more stability than others. So I urge you to keep that in mind as you make your decisions.
Thank you. We will. Appreciate your comments. Well, hello.
Good evening. My name is Vivian Nolan. I'm a 4th grader at the Malcolm White. I live at 9 Hinsted Road. I'm here to tell you that rising 5th graders should have a voice in this huge decision of redistricting. There is no input from rising 5th graders, let alone any student in the district. You have been hearing from teachers and parents, but no kids. So I'd like you to consider keeping rising 5th graders at their school. To start with, my friends and I have spent 5 amazing years together. If my neighborhood and I got moved, I would have to start fresh without knowing anybody. I'm good at making friends, but I should not have to start over for only 1 year. It just doesn't seem fair. I think that I can guarantee that no one wants to do that. Also, for some kids, eating alone at lunch and being the odd one out when everyone else knows each other can truly affect your mental health. In addition, if I was redistricted, I would not be able to participate in all the 5th grade activities with my friends that I would have been looking forward to for so long. Another reason why you should keep rising 5th graders at their school is because we have bonded with our teachers and staff for 5 years. Nothing can ever replace knowing a teacher so well that you can talk to them about anything. I have had an incredible experience with the teachers at Malcolm White, and I would never give that away for anything. If I had to move schools, I would have to start all over and build brand new relationships with the teachers at my new school. Furthermore, their personalities might not match mine, and I could end up feeling like other kids and I don't have the support we need. Finally, I want to mention that it takes me less than 10 minutes to walk to school, so if I went to any other school, it would be too far to walk. My family and I would have to make sure that I had a ride to and from school. I would also have to make note of the fact that we have not really had a normal year. In kindergarten, we had COVID-19, 1st grade COVID-19 a little less, 2nd grade the strike, which was a good thing, 3rd grade redistricting, and 4th grade redistricting some more. I just want to be able to enjoy my last year before middle school stress-free. So I think I have made my point that rising 5th graders should stay at their school. I hope you will consider my idea. Thank you for your hard work and have a good night.
Good job. Good job.
I think the committee I think that I'll just respond that the committee certainly will take that into consideration.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Is there anyone else in the audience that would like to speak before the committee?
Tough to follow Vivian.
Mr. Nickerson, I think you have some competition for the principal of the Malcolm White. Hi, good evening.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm Ashley Peterson. I'm at 20 Cranston Circle, and I didn't prepare anything this time. I'm going to just try to speak. That was amazing, listening to her voice. I just want to that was great. So I was going to come up here and let me start over.
Sure.
My children, I feel like, are kind of in a lose-lose situation. We're getting redistricted no matter what. We're in a very small component. So my child is one of the least disruption children, I guess, which means that she's kind of in it on her own. My son, he's great. He'll be fine. But my daughter, I think, will have a little bit of a harder time with that. And I was going to advocate that, I wish that there were ways that the components were switched so that there was more kids moving to one school together. But I mean, listening to everybody, I know that everybody's just advocating for their own kids. Everybody wants to just stay where they are and not have the disruption. So I think I want to use my time to instead, again, advocate for, to anybody that does the budget, that anybody's thinking about the numbers and where to move things and to approve the money in the town, to be thinking about how we can support the kids when they're transitioning so that there's more mental health supports, more staffing at recess, more ways that we can help the kids just feel contained and supported and secure in these transitions, especially the rising fifth graders that might not have a choice and are feeling so alone in this new place without their friends that they've made for several years now. I can say that I know from the Malcolm White, wherever, I don't know where Rob is right now, but I know that we had a tough,
He's right
there. We had a tough couple years, and I know that my daughter has just thrived there. So I feel really confident in the Malcolm White, and I just don't know about any other school, and so I think that it would be a real bummer to leave there. So I guess if I had to tell you to vote one way, I'd say 3, because that's the one that I think we have the best bet with. But I really want to urge and advocate as strongly as I can for more supports to be put in place in schools. Whether that's long-term subs or actual positions, I just think that it's so, so vital to this process.
Thank you, Ms. Peterson. Appreciate it. Is there anyone else that would like to come and speak before the committee?
We'll start the clock on you.
Hello, President Dillon. How are you doing tonight?
Good evening, everyone.
That's how you start public comment at the
There
City
you go.
Council. So.
Thank you for the opportunity to talk. I had no intention on speaking tonight, and I'm sitting here and I'm listening to all the information, and something hit me. And I said to myself, well, that's something I'm going to call one of the members of the school committee tomorrow and ask the question, because I have each and every one of your phone numbers in my phone. I said, that's not fair. Let me ask it tonight. So it's kind of a basic question. In the whole redistricting plan, do we have numbers as far as the cost of the transportation? And is that a big driver in the redistricting plan as far as the cost? I ask that because in City Council, one of the committees we have is the audit committee. And once a week, 2 or 3 members of the City Council come in and check every bill that goes through the city of Woburn. And when I was on that audit committee, one of the big costs for the school committee in the city was transportation. So my big question here tonight is, I know when you talk redistricting, the first thing that comes into mind is buses. One of the things also I know is when the bids went out, if I remember correctly, there were very few businesses interested in making that bid. So I believe there was only one. When there isn't competition, obviously you're held somewhat had hostage. So again, my question is, how hard did we look at what this is going to cost now and in the future for the transportation? Thank you for your time.
Thank you, President Dillon. I anticipate the administration is able to answer that during our discussion. Is there anyone else in the audience that would like to come to speak before the committee?
Good evening,
Good
everyone.
evening.
My name is Courtney Glazier, and I live at 19 Valley Road. I'm a mom of 3 boys, 10th grade, 7th, and 1st. My first grader attends the Harold Wyman, and our component is H11. That's one of the components that, at some point, based on the newest maps, will be moved to the Malcolm White. My thoughts and feelings change on a regular basis about this redistricting, as I'm sure the same goes for all of you. I've come to terms, though, with the idea that my son will most likely be moving. It will be very challenging for him, I'm sure, but I can see the bigger picture. I'm here tonight to point out one aspect of Scenario 3 that I find very concerning. If Scenario 3 passes, that means that H11 will be the only component moving to the Malcolm White next year. And while our component looks large, and I'm hearing that there's high numbers that don't make sense to me, to be quite honest. Our component includes Library Park, the senior living apartment behind the library, and portions of Woburn Center. So I don't believe it's as big as the numbers I'm seeing say. But this is where I really struggle, because I have come to terms with him having to move and leave his friends. But I'm not okay with the thought of him being the only first grade boy to have to move. This feels so unsettling and honestly just wrong. If we're having students move next year, please do it in a way that makes not just such small groups move. That will be so confusing to them and will make the transition to a new school that much more difficult. These kids will be the pioneers of this redistricting, the kids who will start us off in this process, and we need to protect them and their mental health. And making a very small group of kids move, in this case, my son would be the only first grade boy, which, right now, telling him first grade girls are moving, that doesn't really mean anything to him. Girls are gross, kind of thing. So that would be a really big deal for him. So as a lot of other parents have said, it feels so much better to know you're not alone. And in this option, he would feel alone, and I feel like other kids would feel the same way. So please consider that. Thank you.
Thank you. Will. Is there anyone else in the audience that would like to come to speak to the committee?
Hello again.
Hello.
Didn't ever imagine I would be a school committee regular speaker, but here I am. I'm Alex Tisdale. I live at 5 Majority Lane, and I am the Malcolm White parent rep. I have a 5-year-old son, Jack, and he's in kindergarten at Malcolm White. So I think both NMAPs are good. They more evenly distribute high-need students and do a nice job with class size equity. I don't think we can go wrong with either NMAP, and that's a very good thing. Where my head is at now is with the phase maps. These are the maps that will impact our kids for the foreseeable future, and I do not want to see those actual children get lost in the bigger picture. Each phase map has both strengths and weaknesses. We can't solve everything. I'm just hoping to move forward with an option that does not create more problems with its solutions. I do not minimize the challenge this poses, and I know there is absolutely no perfect solution, no perfect map, and we need to bend in some areas. Malcolm White is in a unique position in this redistrict in that there is no program housed currently at the school, and we have the space and capacity to take on more students. I know that our entire Malcolm White community is ready to do just that. That said, I want to be sure that we're not overly optimistic in our pursuits to move kids. Scenario 6 phased adds 61 children to the Malcolm White. This brings the total number of students to 379 children. In the past 20 years, the highest number of students at the Malcolm White has ever enrolled was 338. That was in 2024, and it's when we began this conversation, and ultimately we did move a program out of the school to create more space. Scenario 6 phase places the Malcolm White with the highest enrollment numbers in the district and will bring in 40 more children than the building has ever accommodated before. People are likely getting tired of hearing me talk about classroom needs equity versus classroom size equity, but the numbers just don't tell the whole story. The complexities of students and their additional learning needs oftentimes impact the classroom more significantly than just the amount of students in the classroom. In phase 6, you'll see some of the percentages of high needs students at the Malcolm White decrease. However, because the enrollment numbers increased by so much, despite this decrease in percentages, the actual number of children in the building and in the classroom with special learning needs stays almost exactly the same. So again, Malcolm White will end up with the highest enrollment numbers in its building's history, with no significant change in the amount of high needs learners that makes our classroom so beautifully complex right now. I'm not an educational expert, and I do not bring this perspective up lightly, as the worst thing that could be done in this whole situation is nothing. We are all here to do right by all of the children in Woburn. Maybe this piece of the plan is what needs to happen to put out bigger fires elsewhere. Like I said, Malcolm White can handle more children, and on paper this works. Our principal and staff are absolutely exceptional, and they'll continue to tirelessly give our children the best opportunities they're humanly able to. If this is the direction we must go in, I hope to see a plan for an increase in the services, teachers, providers, mental health staff at the Malcolm White to meet the needs of the increased number of students and not detract from anyone's educational experience. Our kids deserve that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else in the audience that would like to come and speak before the committee? Hello.
Hey guys, I'm Rachel Kuberry. I live at 6 Blake Street in the Harold Wyman community. So as I've shared with many of you, I'm a process person. I'm invested in the redistrict from a process perspective. I believe that if we have a good process, the community and myself included will be able to better trust the end result. So my comments tonight are about the process. First, please consider putting more time between the public forum and the final vote. As scheduled now, it appears performative as there's no time at all to incorporate any public feedback on the maps. The timeline that you've shared all along says that in May and June you will incorporate feedback and finalize scenarios for the school committee vote. So while I appreciate an earlier vote, June I think is too late, there's no time between the public forum and that vote and that meeting, and so it looks performative. If you're really going to incorporate public feedback, please leave time to do so. And if you're not, please be honest about that. Second, I think we need to better explain the end maps. We've heard all along from this committee and administration that redistricting lasts about 10 years. But we've also heard, and Ms. Young said it again tonight, we can't predict the future. So we're doing the best we can with the end maps. That's what I believe. That's our best guess of where we're going. But the reality is that we may never use those full end maps. We may open a new school with an attached ECP in 7, 8, or 9 years. And by that point, the current end maps will be kind of expired, for lack of a better word. So we'll need to look at redistricting again. We're not just going to plow forward with those in 10 years and say the work we did 10 years ago holds up, even with the development that's coming and the changing nature of our city. So the community really needs to focus on the phase maps. That's what's happening for real. The end maps do have value, though. They will help guide the administration in what to move if we need to do a second phase of this redistrict. We should all expect a redistrict again in a decade, and that very well may mean that we never hit the end of these particular maps. What is important, however, is that we don't move kids twice in this redistrict, and I think that the end maps help us make a plan to prevent that. I look forward to hearing more about these items and other things in your deliberation on this. Thanks, guys.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else in the audience that would like to come and speak before the committee?
Hi, everybody. Hi. Brian Preventer, Brunswick Park Ave. I, much like Alex, did not expect to be a fixture here at the school committee, but here I am, speaking again. We've done a lot of work over the past 2 years. I think it's kind of clear that something needs to happen. We need to make some changes. We need to really look at our schools, create some equity for all of our learners. We've looked at countless maps. I've said it before, I'll continue to say it, no map is perfect. I think Rachel just put it best that we're looking for a goal. And if we get to that goal, then great, but that goal could be 10 years down the road. We have no idea what's going to happen, what other districts are going to come in, what other developments we're going to have. I do want to thank you guys for looking at North Woburn, for districting kids up there, thinking about a new school. I think that the gray area is really important for North Woburn so that both schools can work collaboratively. I think creating bubble rooms up in the smallest schools would be difficult for all of our learners. And so having some flexibility there is really, really important. And I just want to thank the committee for really looking at that and incorporating that into the end maps. I do want to speak against scenario 6. I do think that both end maps are good. I think that they could serve our city in the future. But the phase is really where we need to think about. We need to think about where we're going to be in September and hopefully in the next couple years after that. Scenario 6 just moves way too many kids. It puts way too much pressure on the Malcolm White, in my opinion. I understand that they don't have a sub-separate program, and that does help them, but increasing their capacity up to almost 85%, we've talked about that in committee, 85% is where you start to sound the alarm, and you start to think, okay, what can we do to make sure that we're alleviating some of that space problems? So scenario 6 just scares me. I think scenario 3 accomplishes what we need to do. It moves kids out of the Harold Wyman, creates some space there, and it really solves a lot of our overcrowding issues. I think the one other thing I did want to mention too is that in scenario 6, the capacity at the Shamrock also scares me at 93%. And again, I understand that there are some moving pieces there where you can move around ECP classrooms and you can accommodate things, but putting a school to start a phase at 90+% is kind of scary because we don't know where we're going to be in a few years. So with that, I just want to throw my support behind scenario 3. I know that we still have a long way to go. We'll still be looking at these maps, making tweaks here and there. But I think that scenario 3 is the best in terms of equitableness for all of our students here in Woburn. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else in the audience that would like to come and speak? Hi, good evening, everybody.
Hi, my name is Sarah Bergman McCool. I live out on Kinston Road. I have 2 kids at the Malcolm White right now. And tonight I can get my screen to be bright enough. I first wanted to say something that wasn't about the redistrict, which is I just wanted to share that on Saturday, on April 5th, Woburn hosted the Northeast Regional Treble Chorus concert at the high school with the conductor Eric Williamson. 160 area students participated in the concert, including 37 Woburn 4th and 5th grade students from all 7 elementary schools. including my eldest child. It was a fantastic show. These students and our 4 music teachers put in a lot of time this year practicing and preparing, and I just wanted to take a moment to thank those teachers and all the students who participated and the Woburn Music Department, and to share my hope that Woburn Public Schools continues to support all the arts for our students, especially as budgets are coming up, and I want everyone to continue to support that. Also, to speak to the redistrict, I just had a question about this map, and I'm going to ask it now in hopes that it, or not map, but chart. Looking at scenario 3, I don't see any components from the Malcolm White Reeves or Shamrock moving, but I do see them listed here as moving out, and there's some really small numbers in here, so I'm hoping that when we get to your part of it that we can speak specifically to this chart and update it in real time. Next, I wanted to say that I've spoken here before. I support doing the redistrict. I think it is time. We've had 2 years of this. And I hope that we are coming out at the end of the month or beginning of May with a clear direction of where we're going to go. That said, looking at the 2 scenarios that are being considered tonight, I'm in support of scenario 3. If our goal with these phase maps is to, in September 25, relieve immediate pressure from schools that are overcrowded, specifically the Harold Wyman, and to have the least disruption moving of students while also addressing this problem, I think option 3, scenario 3, does this best. And I'm focused on the phase maps because, as Brian just mentioned, there are so many unknowns in the future, and how are we going to know what's going to happen in capital projects to build new schools here in Woburn and the timeline for that, new developments going in around the city that will bring in more families and students, and unknowns in potential federal funding. So to me, it makes sense to take as measured and conservative approach for this fall as possible in moving students. To that end, I also don't think that we should be moving 4 students out of a place, and so that's also why I think it's important to know where the students are moving out of, and to me, making sure that we're thoughtful about that. Looking at scenario 6, it moves 134 more students this September than scenario 3 would be. Scenario 3 moves about 9.6% of our elementary student population, if that 203 number is accurate, or less if it is inflated. And then it moves about 16% in scenario 6. And this is just a temporary map. This is not the end map, and it's a really big impact on our city to be moving 16% of all students. And I think that doing that may put us in a situation where we wouldn't be able to have all the options that we need open for the middle school redistrict, where these students would be going, and be potentially putting us in the place where we would have to move those same students again if we take off too big of a bite right now. Finally, I've spoken with families from rising 5th graders at Malcolm White and other schools, and I do think that there are going to be different choices that families make. Some families with younger students may need, even if given the option to stay, they may need to move to the new school if they are being redistricted. And so I think it's going to be important for the school committee to try to address some of the anxiety that rising 5th graders have, current 4th graders have, and their families do about what are their options. Will they be given the option to stay at their home school or to move to the new school? And when will that decision be made? Because these are real numbers, and some of these numbers are very small, and I think it will affect what happens with the redistrict. So there may need to be a process where the school committee is reaching out to those rising 5th graders in the numbers that have been noted by Courtney. And I also think that, as so many of us have spoken this evening about the impact on our own families and concerns, that there may be other pieces that could be considered by the school committee and the administration for incoming new enrollments, that potentially those new enrollments could be allocated to schools that they do not yet have a relationship with, but they could, especially if they are nearby that school and they could have peers that live near them. I think it's an important piece of the data to consider, because moving new incoming folks who could be going to a school that makes sense for them, that is proximal to where they're going to be going, or maybe part of an NMAP, would be beneficial and would require less movement of currently enrolled students. Again, thank you to all the community who is showing up tonight, and also to the school committee members. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else in the audience that would like to come and speak before the committee?
Hi, good evening. Good evening, everybody. Bernice Friedman, I live on 56 Leonard Street, and I'm the school rep for the Shamrock Elementary School. First of all, I'd like to say thank you on behalf of the Shamrock families. Thank you for keeping our school as an elementary school. I know it was a lot of stressful moments last month when it was discussed that the Shamrock could potentially become the ECP center. So for us to get to this point, I just want to say thank you. A lot of our parents are very relieved to know that their school, our school, will remain as an elementary school for our students. I do want to point out that currently the Shamrock School has the highest percentage of low income as well as percentage of special education for the size of our school. And for both S3 and S6, the Shamrock will remain to have the highest percentage of low income and percentage of special ed students in our building. However, what really concerns us is the capacity. Although we're happy to see that both options, S3 and S6, would keep our MAPS components intact. It's really concerning to see the 92% percentage capacity in S6. And we're the only school that would bump up to over 90 compared with the other schools, at least just by looking at the numbers. So I'm here really to, if we are only going to look at these two, and that's it, two options, I would love to look at more scenarios because I do sympathize with my fellow school reps, the challenges that they face in looking at their own school districts and how, it really impacts families to move one component to another school. But if we really are going to look at just these two, and that's it, on behalf of the Shamrock, I would like to advocate for the S3 option because it moves the least number of students. I know one of the parents before me, you asked about the number, the 4. I did ask that during the last advisory meeting because I'm looking at the Shamrock map, even though we keep the same, I was told that those students were, correct me if I'm wrong later on, were children of staff members who may not live in the Shamrock area, but they are bringing their students into work with them, and so that's why there are changes in the numbers, even though the maps are the same. I hope that helps. So, thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else in the audience that would like to come and speak before the committee? Hi, good evening.
I'm Morgan Kuberry. I live on Blake Street. I'm here to speak tonight about my child and her classmates. Fourth grader at the Harold Wyman and a rising fifth grader through the expected fall redistrict. Her grade will be the last of the children whose schooling was directly impacted by the COVID pandemic. That class entered elementary school with hybrid or remote kindergarten, and we owe them a good finish to elementary school and the opportunity to stay behind at their current school should they get redistricted and want to stay, in my opinion. The reason I'm bringing this up is that I want the school committee and administration to discuss this group of students specifically in their upcoming deliberation on maps. I want to hear more about how the maps address the guiding principle of least disruption as it pertains to those students. I also ask that we choose a map and determine if it's possible to offer the choice for these students to stay back, and that we make it policy to offer this choice if practical. And I think it will be practical to do so, because not everyone is going to take the option anyway. Some people it'll be more convenient for transportation issues, for example, or something like that. I want these discussions to be public and for the families of the rising fifth graders to be incorporated into that. If map number 6 is selected, there will be a very large group of rising Harold Wyman fifth graders, but that shouldn't deter us from trying to make that an option for those children. In order to do that, however, we would need to start planning early and communicating with families about what they might choose to do. I urge you to do that sooner rather than later. Otherwise, these kids would normally not find out about their placement until much later, the same time as all the other students. And those rising fifth graders should not have to wait to make those plans and decide what they need to do. So, since there's time to be working on this now, please do so. And when you take a vote on the final maps, please also vote on the rising fifth graders so that both things are determined at once. Both the map and what the policy will be for rising fifth graders could be determined at the same time to give families the option to adjust. And that is all.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else in the audience that would like to come and speak before the committee? Hello.
Hi, my name's Arnold Ross. I live on Phillip Street. I have 3 kids at the Harold Wyman, one who will be a rising fifth grader. As I'm sitting here listening to everything people have to say and the numbers of capacity of the school, I'm really reminded that I feel like we're rearranging chairs on the deck of the Titanic, and that our real need is more space. And I want the school committee to, as soon as possible, start looking into acquiring more space, presumably another elementary school. Especially when you consider all the developments that we've recently had completed and the massive developments that will soon be completed. We're only going to get more kids as that stuff opens up. I too would like to throw my support behind allowing rising fifth graders the chance to stay if they so desire. You look forward to fifth grade when you're king of the hill, so to speak. It'd be a hard thing to take away from them. I know not every kid will be able to for whatever reason. I do think they should have that option. And lastly, I would just remind the committee that you're responsible for all the kids in Woburn, not the kids of any one parent that gets up here. No matter how passionately they talk to you, you're not responsible for just special needs kids who you've said have had considerable impact already, but you are responsible for every kid in this town. So, good luck.
Thank you
very much. Is there anyone else in the audience that would like to come and speak to the committee?
Space.
Hello, I'm Lauren Fenley, 10 Kennedy. As usual, I didn't have anything written. I didn't think I was going to speak, but that happened last time. I just had a couple of quick questions. One, echoing the fifth graders coming in next year. I mentioned the COVID and fifth graders last year, so I won't repeat myself. I guess my big question is with the phase maps, we're seeing what it is, what September will be, and then an end map that will maybe be in 10 years and look entirely different when there is a new building. And that's okay. For the people that are like, I'm in age 14, we will eventually go somewhere that's maybe not where we are. Are we going to have to revisit this every single year, wondering, is this the year we move, is this the year we move? Because that's kind of stressful, and it's a lot of effort and energy and money for all of you. I'm assuming you don't want to figure out after-school investing and moving programs and specialists. So I guess just what is the end goal for this phasing? If we do the least disruptive, which I think everyone is probably in favor of, is moving the least amount of people next year, are we then going to just continually take little tiny bits every year? And it just seems a little bit messy, and I'm not in favor of making a big change, but as I have 4 kids and one is in preschool and the other's 4th going into 5th grade, which of my kids is going to get moved and when. I don't want to think about that for the next 8 or 9 years, and I'm probably going to have to, but making it the least disruptive without having to change things every single year would probably just be something to consider, or I'm thinking about it at least. And also, I just want to say thank you. This is not an easy task, and I don't envy any of you. This is a lot of work. And lastly, I do want to say that everyone here feels very emotional about their district and their school, and I will be gutted if I leave my school. But it is a true test to every single person that has come up to here and spoken about their school. Like, we clearly all care about our schools, and it's a good sign. We have great elementary schools, so like if someone gets moved, we're all going to a good place. And I don't know, we have some great people here, and we've got some great schools. So that's all. I just feel like we're doing a good thing. We're going into all good schools no matter where we're moving. It's going to be hard for everybody, coming or going. People are going to lose friends. People are going to gain friends. So that's all. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else in the audience that would like to come and speak before the committee? I'm not seeing anyone. Okay, so I'm going to close public. No, I'm not.
Thank you.
Welcome.
I'm Nadia, and good evening, everybody. And I'm just going to read what I prepared. I'm a parent of in the GA section district, and I'm here to express my concerns about the potential redistricting to Alta Vista and how it could be negatively impacting my son. And my son and his education, of course. One of my biggest concerns is the class congestions at Alta Vista. The rooms are smaller and the student population is already crowded. I worry this environment will not support his academic needs the same way Goodyear has. I believe also that, Goodyear has been incredibly supportive and accommodating, and my son has been thriving there. And approaching him again, especially knowing this would be his second time being redistricted. And possibly not the last, would be incredibly disruptive. This kind of instability isn't just about academics, it affects his mental health and overall well-being. I truly believe this move is not in his best interest, and I hope the committee will consider the long-term impact this may have on our children. I also have another concern. I don't know if I can raise it here or not.
Sure.
I'm wondering if the city of Woburn is unable to accommodate more students in its schools. Why is it allowing more families to move on, and approving the construction of additional residential buildings? This decision should be made with the city school capacity and student well-being. And I'm sorry if I'm raising this question. Thank you.
That's okay. Thank you very much. Is there anyone else that would like to come and speak before the committee? Okay, I'm not seeing any. So I'm going to close public comment at this time. Okay, so now we are still on the topic of redistricting, and I believe at this point the committee can ask the administration questions or deliberate on any topics that come up during redistricting. I think it's important to address some of the questions. So I would first ask whether or not there are budget impacts in transportation. I know we have vetted that, so if the administration could answer that.
Sure, you can go ahead. I wrote down the questions and the answers up. But the transportation one, you are welcome to go, but I should be able to do the rest of it.
Yeah. So to the question relative to transportation costs, we have looked at the scenario 3, scenario 6, and we don't see any significant transportation increase. The bus routes will change, but the number of buses won't change. The scenario 5 that we looked at earlier, we did note that there are over 500 students that would potentially be impacted by the transportation, and that was one of the reasons why that scenario didn't move forward. But again, that was a factor that we did look at, and I don't know if that answers.
Thank you.
Councilman Dillon.
No, it's important to note that. And did you, Assistant Superintendent Young, did you write down the questions, you're just going to answer them? Is that?
I can go through if it's helpful. I'm
Sure,
more
that would
than
be
welcome to
great.
ask you them, or if it's helpful, I can run through.
That's fine,
Some of
that's
them.
great.
Sure.
Thank you.
Okay. So one was related to the moving out and moving in, related to the districts in which you don't see components move. We, some of that, so for example, G9, which is districted in the Goodyear, that houses some hotels. So there are places within the community in which we have students who are attending schools who are in other components, but they've been all districted to back to components in which they reside. So there are some kind of fluctuating reasons throughout the community in which we have students who have been. So you wouldn't see them as in components, if that makes sense for the group. The next part is related to the Shamrock's percentage of the 92. So one of the things that we talked about related to space is that it's difficult in terms of like the ECP and the buildings where the ECP is. The capacity of the building changes based off of the number of classrooms that are now available. And so the 310 number there that it's working off of is with 12 classrooms each, which when the ECP is in the building is how many classrooms we have. In scenario 6, that is why we're moving the ECP program more into the Reeves. And so you could be, that 310 would be going up because we'd be opening more classrooms. And that's reflected in like the capacity by building number. Again, it's a little bit of a moving target because it's fluctuating based on where we're moving things, but the percentage it's because the 310 number is probably low because we're opening up the rooms. Does that make sense? That 310 number would be higher, which is why on the end map number, you're seeing the percentage lower. It's still the same number of rooms that we have. It's because when the end map is, we know that we're going to have all the space. In the phase map, we're going to be moving between space that we have when related to ECP space. And so the two buildings that have ECP, again, I can say this because Mr. Commonwealth gets a daily phone call from me in which I ask him to remind me again, if you have this many general education classrooms, this many ECPs in your building, I think it's when we're planning, the ECP space is going to change that number.
Yes.
It's a conservative number, yes. The grade 5 question, I've been working with Ashley at Sanborn. We've polled all of the students, scenario 3 and scenario 6. And we're working to send a distribution to those families to begin the process of how many families will be asking to stay. Of course, we can make no guarantees until we have a better understanding of what that number is, but the first step in terms of that notification to families should be coming soon. In terms of, it was the question regarding the number with staff members, families, that was one of the examples. Another example of students would be siblings of students and programs are provided the option to stay. Again, we're going to have to, when this is all, when we go through, we have a lot of different kind of families to be communicating with in which we have different kind of reasons that families are attending schools outside of their home district. And so when you're looking at this snapshot, it's not taking into account every individual situation. Those are things that we'd be doing on the back end, but then when you're looking at numbers, those are some of the instances in which you're seeing like a student move or things like that. And then transportation you answered. I think that was all the ones that I had.
Okay, so I'm just going to open it up to the committee. I have some questions, but I'll start with the committee first. Yes, Mr. Lipset.
So I just wanted to clarify a couple quick things.
Yeah.
We had some parents talking about looking at the different scenarios and putting pressure on particular buildings. I know that one of the things that came up in advisory committee regarding scenario 6 specifically was additional flexibility for the Reeves to account for growth in the ECP. Could you talk a little bit about scenario 6, offering the Reeves that, and why that may be an important thing to do as well?
So one of the reasons that we had looked at having there be end components in which Reeves were to be having a component that moved out was recognizing that we would not necessarily know when ECP would be going to an alternative space, and recognizing between the two buildings we have the current number that we have, which we're trying to respond to different buildings and their ability to increase and keep programming, and so we're in an effort to keep the Reeves and the Shamrock as the only two buildings with ECP. By making space at the Reeves, we really can't make space at the Shamrock, so that's the building that we have the ability to make space in. We're looking to make that space. Again, we're trying to respond to the immediate right now, but also recognizing if there's ways and things that we can make considerations about future, we're trying to do so, and that's what this option was intended to be drawn for. And again, I can, Dr. Ryan can talk a little bit about the growth of the program, if that's really what we're referencing.
Sure. And I think it's actually in the handouts. You can see that we've been increasing essentially a classroom a year for the past 4 years. And you can also look at the anticipated, and this is special education students, which is on here. It isn't necessarily, it is not typical peers, it's special education students. But in 21-22, it was 96, and we anticipate finishing in June at 150. So it is fairly significant growth. And with these special education students, many of them are in need of substantially separate classrooms, which are classrooms that have only a small number of students. And so we've worked hard to balance it. We've worked hard to utilize double sessions in morning and afternoon to the extent that we can, and to place kids efficiently. But you can see that we have consistently been adding a classroom a year. And I expect that next year we will add a classroom and be at 14, and I expect we'll probably be tight at 14 the same way we're right now tight with 13, and may need to open the classroom before the end of the year, depending on the number of students that turn 3 and qualify. So it's very challenging to predict. I would say it is typical with what other communities are seeing right now, and we've just been trying to do the best we can with the space that we have. And fortunately, the buildings are incredibly accommodating and welcoming for these little kiddos.
Okay, so it's fair to say that scenario 6 might offer both the ECP and the Reeves a little bit more flexibility, but there, we heard a little bit about the flip side in terms of Malcolm White capacity, Shamrock capacity. I just wanted to make sure it's clear that both of these scenarios have a little bit of a trade-off in terms of capacity and flexibility at various schools. Thank you for answering that. I appreciate it.
If it's helpful for context, the Shamrock in the final end map, when ECP is in a separate space, you're looking at the building as a 16.
Okay.
And so think about it as the Reeves has space opening, and as you're moving ECPs out, you can make the building go to 16, and that's the intended number that we are looking at an end map, if that's helpful for context.
It is. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Any more questions for administration? Yes, Ms. Cormier.
Something that came up, a student who has a current IEP and then is moved to a different building, would that, I presume, and I just want to make sure that this is accurate, that those services would continue regardless of what building they're in?
Correct. Services are available in every building for the IEP. It does not, and there's a continuum of services across the district, and every child will have their IEP services met. It doesn't matter where they go to elementary school.
It just may be that there might not be somebody at that current school that needs that, so that's why they're thinking that it's not available at, say, Alta Vista, where it is at the Goodyear, but
Yes, sometimes there are different providers. We do have some
Sure.
providers that travel to
Certain
multiple
schools.
buildings as well. However, we are required by law to meet the needs of all of the students. And we do that.
all right, great, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ryan. Thank you, Ms. Cormier. Ms. Wetzel?
Sure. Excuse me. Thank you. Actually, I wanted to first start with thank yous, as I often do, but I just think it's really important in this situation. Thank you, huge thank you to Priya. I know she just left, our Sanborn consultant, to the administration, to all of our caregiver reps, to everyone that spoke to any of their caregiver reps, people at PTO meetings. I just think there's been a lot of involvement in stakeholders in this process, and I think it's been wonderful to see the community come out and really advocate for their students, yes, but also for their schools and for their community and for Woburn as a whole. And it's been really inspiring for me as a school committee member, as a parent, and a citizen of Woburn. So thank you, and thank you to everyone that came up and spoke today. I think it's really important. This process has really grown and thrived and changed because of the comments that we've received from the community. You know, we've seen maps at the beginning of this process, and we're seeing these maps now, and really a lot of the changes have come from the community and feedback that we've heard, and it's been represented by our advisory caregiver reps at our advisory meeting. So to thank you to that. And I just had not a lot of questions, but just a few things I wanted to follow up on from public comment and things that I've spoke with community members throughout this process. I wrote them down so I wouldn't forget. But I wanted to say one other sort of shout out to all of our elementary principals and our schools. I've had the privilege of touring all of our elementary, middle, and high schools with Dr. Crowley, Mayor Concanon, some of our city councilors, some of our school committee members, and you really get a great opportunity to see what it's like inside of our buildings and how wonderful it is, and see the students and see the staff in their element. So we have some great elementary schools. We're very lucky in Woburn to have that. So I agree, it's been said already, but I don't think you cannot go to a wrong school because it doesn't exist in our community. So I'm grateful, and we should all be very grateful for that. And I think with some of the confusion some people have spoke about, I think that comes along with how transparent this process has been, because we've given so much information and allowed access to all information, which I think is very important that we've done that. It can sometimes lead to confusion because you see these changes happening in real time. And it's great that we're all a part of it, but it does mean the process changes because we're talking about maps and numbers and scenarios and whatever, but we're also talking about people and human beings. So this process has been transparent. I hope it hasn't led to too much confusion. I think we've all tried here to educate everyone as best we can, but I do understand that with the transparency factor and all the changes, how it can be confusing. So I appreciate everyone for sticking it out with us. And in terms of looking at the phase map and the end map, I agree. I think we really need to focus on the phase, because that end map is looking at new buildings. New buildings take time. First, we had a building committee that worked on, based off the feasibility study, looked at all of our buildings and prioritized what we should do based on a feasibility study. And their recommendation hasn't been brought forward to the school committee yet. However, what was recommended from the building committee was to combine our North Woburn schools, so the Alta Vista and the Linscott, into one, and then have an ECP attached to that, a separate space for the ECP attached to that building. And then their recommendation was to combine our middle schools into one mega middle school. And we would use MSBA portions, again, this is their recommendation, for the middle schools, and then look at funding for our North Woburn schools. I expect more information to come out in regards to MSBA funding and what that is. And MSBA funding is basically state funding that we can use to help pay for our school buildings. As we know, it's a very expensive process, and that process does take time. So we aren't going to have new buildings in the next few years. Do I hope we have some before the next 10? Oh, I absolutely do. I really do. I'm rooting for it, and I know I'm not the only one. But again, that process takes time, and I expect to hear more about it this year, and I expect to, in resources and capital planning, one of the subcommittees I chair, we've actually talked about MSBA funding and what the next steps are that Superintendent Crowley and Chair Crowley can do to start setting us up for an application for next April to apply for MSBA funding. So please know that is certainly very front of our radar, and expect to hear more about it at meetings. And I loved hearing from our student today about the rising fifth graders. It really warmed my heart. I think it's wonderful when students come. I've said it before, I'll say it again, all students are welcome. Please Doesn't matter if it has to do with redistricting, your grade, we love having you. You're really an insight into our schools. And it's great to hear from our caregivers, but it's something special to hear from a student. And I think she nailed it on the head, how important it is, if we can, to keep those rising fifth graders in the schools that they're in now. I actually moved in the middle of fifth grade to a different state. I'm totally fine, I think. But, you know, it was hard. I did it, and ultimately I understand why my parents did it. It was the right call. And kids, we talk about it, they're resilient, they'll make new friends. But if we here have an opportunity to make that happen, I think those children deserve it, especially knowing they started school, their COVID year in elementary, and that was really hard. So I think knowing that the survey's coming out soon to families, I think anyone that has a rising fifth grader that's affected in those components, both scenario 3 and 6, should keep a lookout for information and talk to your student if that seems appropriate. But I'm happy to hear that's being worked on, and I agree, it was stated in public comment, to make that decision about those rising fifth graders at the same time as we're making a decision about the map. I think we would have to, for one, and two, I think we owe it to the fifth grade and the families to make that decision at that time. I think that's all I have for right now, so thank you.
Ms. Wetzel, I'm going to back up just a little bit. So can we address the next steps that the if the committee is going to consider some sort of exempting of rising fifth graders, I think let's back up and talk about what the next step would be to investigate a policy regarding rising fifth graders.
So what I'm envisioning, I think, is as part of a survey that gets pushed out, asking rising fifth graders if they would be interested in remaining at the school. That would be the question.
Okay.
One of the factors would be if they have multiple students at the same, you know, like their
Yes.
Siblings.
siblings. That would be probably not something that we would be able to accommodate.
Right, okay. So the am I hearing this right, that the administration is going to send out a survey very soon to families that are currently...
We'll send out a survey to everybody.
Everybody, okay.
But
All right.
we'll be sending out a separate survey just to the families of the students of rising fifth graders.
Right, okay.
So we have the list
Yes.
of scenario 3 and scenario 6, and some are redundant, right?
Okay.
And so that will go to just those families, asking them that if they were provided the option for their rising fifth grader to remain, would they opt to do so? Of course, we would. That is just an investigatory
Yes,
ask.
absolutely.
And then we would look at that against the current number of enrollment.
Right.
And so that the first phase would be that part of it. My understanding is that we're not asking about any siblings, that we are only making considerations related to our rising fifth grade students right now. And so that would really be part 1.
So the school committee can make a data-driven decision about whether or not to exempt.
We'd be able to tell you
Yes.
if we,
Okay.
for students to stay in the 2 options, what that would look like.
Excellent, okay.
Yep.
So when, do we have a timeline on when that survey would go out?
The hope had been to have the meeting this evening.
Okay, yeah, of course.
But the next step is actually for the elementary principals to cross-check and verify the list that I have from Sanborn. Again, the students who are in different buildings for different reasons, and so we're going to make sure that we have the right student list. But I have the student pulled from the geocoding from Sanborn. We'll verify that with the building principals, and once we know that we have the accurate list of families, we'll push out the survey to just them. And so, again, my hope is that it would be soon, but I want to make sure with the right information.
Thank you very much, Assistant Superintendent Young.
And
Dr. Crowley?
Sanborn is also building out I'm going to say it, the interactive map as well, that people would be able to plug in and see where they would go.
Okay. Ms. Chisholm, Vice Chair Chisholm.
I have, so on the survey for the fifth graders, if you could add a line to see if they have siblings in the school, because as a mom, I don't know if I could get to 2 elementary schools, and that the transportation, if they do take it to that school now, it would not be provided in that area, so that way that they would know, because it would make a difference. I mean, I might say that I want my fifth grader to stay, but if I have a son in the second grade, I might not be able to feasibly do it. But the answer would be yes, I'd like them to stay. But, so just so that they know that there's not going to probably be an opportunity for families to stay, but just for fifth graders to stay.
Just to confirm, but my understanding is that any rising fifth graders that opted to stay would not be provided transportation to stay.
Right.
And so that when we send out the survey, it will inform them that this is only for your rising fifth grader student, as well as you would have to arrange your own transportation in order for them to stay. So is that
right? Yeah, I just don't want them to be confused.
Yeah,
okay.
Of course.
Yep.
In terms of for siblings, that's something that we could pull, I guess, as information if we wanted to know it. I'm concerned on the survey to not just ask if they're planning to stay or not, right? Because if I know that it's like they want to but aren't necessarily making the commitment to do so, would be my only concern.
Right.
Thank you.
Okay. And I just want to say that I think that it's really important for us to recognize the fact that everybody that came up tonight wanted to stay in their school, and that realized that they had their little safe space, so that even though it's not just one school, that we have 7 schools, everybody feels very comfortable in their school. So it should be kind of almost a relief to other parents to know that if they do move, it is a welcoming space somewhere else too. It's just not theirs. And kudos to the principals that all came tonight. I think that's a great show of support, and it's something that I really want to acknowledge and I appreciate. And we're doing this just for more space. We tried a different option to get more space, but that didn't work, so we have to wait for our new school to be built. So that's down the road a little bit, but we will work really hard to get that done on the fast track as soon as we can. And it has to happen this year to relieve this problem. I mean, we've been here for 2 years doing this. I think we've put all of the very familiar faces out there through enough. And even though it's going to be hard to make a change if we have to, it needs to be done. I lived through it. My son, he's okay. He's a police officer. His head's still on. So, but he was moved when we redistricted back in '89, and it was devastating to me because I was moved out of the wonderful Wyman up into the Linscott, which became my home, and I loved dearly. And all 4 of my children bloomed there, and it was a great opportunity. I think that as budget time comes, we will also need your support to get the support for your children. So we hope you come back so we can, argue for all the money that we can possibly get to make sure that we have support in place. And I'm hoping that once this is done, and I've spoken about it again, once we know where your children are going, maybe we could have popsicles on the playground so kids can come and meet other kids there and make it more welcoming. And as we know, over the summer, kids can meet other kids. We can join families together and hope that this is as easy as a transition as we possibly can make. I mean, it is hard, it's tough, but it'll be okay. And sometimes when we do move larger kids, there was a parent that said that you do have more friends from that school moving with you. If you only take 10 kids from that school, you might feel very isolated. So that's something for us to think about when we're making our decision. And with this, some of these scenarios, the middle schools, split schools gets fixed a little bit, so I think that's also a plus. I'm glad the South End will be back, and I don't have to listen to, I'm at the Goodyear, but the kids are going to Kennedy, and I'm going to Joyce, so I just think that that's also a plus. But we absolutely will do the best we can for our students, and that's what we're all here for, and we'll work to do the best, and we enjoy and really appreciate the fact that you take the time to come, you email us, you let your voices heard, because that's what we're here for. So as long as you may not like the final decision, but we're doing what's best for as many as we can, and we hear you, we really do. I'm writing all sorts of stuff down, but I'm rambling, and I will stop.
Thank you, Vice Chair Chisholm. Anyone else? Mr. Austin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I feel like Ms. Wessel kind of stole a lot of my thoughts, so I want to give a big shout out to the parents, kind of echoing, because I really believe in community input. I appreciate those that have taken the time to email, call, also those that have spoke. I think that's really important. And I will say this, please don't feel bad if you speak. Please continue to speak. I'll say it time and time again, I'm not a professional. I don't know everything and all things, and your voices matter to me. I really, truly believe that. I do want to speak on a rising fifth grader. I cannot not acknowledge the young person that came before us. I thought she was very impressive. I was a fifth grade. It's funny, again, Ms. Wetzel. I moved 3 times at fifth grade. It was not a fun time. It was really challenging, so I cannot sit and not let my voice be shown, be presented. That I would love for the young people to stay, those that are rising. And correct me if I'm wrong, colleagues, I recall last year when we talked about this, that was one of our principles. If not, it was something about grandfathering in our fifth graders, and now we're talking about sending a survey out. I'm not opposed to that. My only challenge with the survey is that when we sent out a survey before, I didn't get anything. So I'm just concerned that, what about the parents that do not follow everything that's taking place? What about the parents that don't check emails as much as others, and then they are redistricted, even though they may have wanted to opt in or opt out, however they chose? But is there a way, so there's a question for admin, is there a way to like get confirmation? I know, in similar way, like when you get a phone text, you can see that somebody received it. I don't know if maybe that's too technology advanced, but I'm just thinking, like, is there a way to find out? Because we want to confirm that parents are receiving that information, because it will be heartbreaking that following year they're like, wait a second, I'm going to a new school, and they never knew. So I'm just not sure if that you guys can do that.
So kind of twofold. One, in terms of the survey related to the rising fifth graders. Again, I'm going to work really with the building administration. This is one of those forms that we're not going to just assume your answer. We're going to be working to make sure that we get an answer from every family. And so we'll have an answer, and we'll work in terms of the different ways to communicate and work with families and work at the different schools in terms of how that information goes out. So we'll send it in a survey, but we'll also make sure that we have a response from everyone. And then in terms of the plan for kind of implementation, again, working with the elementary administration, we'll do a lot of different work related to not only notifying, but also what does transition plans look like. One of the things that we've talked about is that we do have the kindergarten orientation night that's coming up, and work that we can do around for our incoming students, as well as what sorts of things we need to plan, especially in our buildings that have, different impacts. Will look different based off of those buildings, but we'll be planning a lot of different ways in which we'll be not only getting the information out, but also be providing support for students that are moving, and families, and how we're going to open up schools for families to come and tour and view, and kind of all those different pieces. So that'll be part of a larger transition plan that we're certainly doing the work of behind the scenes now.
Thank you. Another question is, given our time frame and everything, I know you can't determine how fast a parent replies to you, but are you going to give like 2-week notice, 3 weeks? Like, what are your guys' thoughts on that, to give parents like to respond to that form or that survey?
In terms of the rising fifth graders, I mean, we're going to be looking for, response rates. Again, we'll certainly give people time, but we're going to be looking for responses, relatively quickly on their plans. Again, the more information that we have, and the sooner we have it, the more we can start making different decisions.
Just a suggestion. It's annoying, but it's also helpful. I don't know if you guys recall the robot calling. You guys, nobody? Maybe am I that old? Are you thinking about using that? I know text messaging is helpful, but I'm just thinking the more ways to get information out, the more beneficial it can be for people to reply.
Yeah, we could do any number of communication methods. One of the things I would say to the survey as well, one of the things we found over the past few years is that most people respond to a survey within the first 48 to 72 hours. You can say we're going to keep it open for 3 weeks, and you just don't see anyone respond after 48 to 72 hours. So it doesn't mean that we're going to have a 72-hour survey. It's just that's been the finding. We can keep it open for a week or a week and a half, and then remind people that it's open while it's still open. I think that might be a good way to approach it. But again, just most people that interact with a survey do so relatively quickly after receiving it.
Excellent, thank you. Maybe this is a good chance for the community to also help share the survey. I think, if you're willing, community members maybe, to get the word out there.
Mr. Austin?
Yes.
Ms. Young and I were just looking at the numbers, and it looks like it's at maximum 74 families. So I'm quite confident that we'll be able to reach the families. We know it's important. We don't want anybody to miss something like that, but I think in looking in collaboration with the building principals, we can get that done.
We'll make sure we get a response from everyone.
Thank you.
Either way.
Thank you, Mr. Austin. Ms. Wetzel?
Sorry, I just had a follow-up
Of course.
sort of thought question, and we just talked about it briefly, but the plans that we have to help students integrate into their new buildings, staff, if they need to be moved, integrate into the new buildings. I know we're working behind the scenes on those, which I'm very grateful for. I'm wondering when the community might know what that looks like and when those activities might happen, just because I know everyone's lives are very busy, and especially any time of the year. But so I'm just wondering when we might expect to hear more on a timeline on those particular activities.
I would say most of it's scheduled post your vote.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yeah. But
So-
certainly as we get near when the decision will be made, we'll release, the timelines. We're working around a lot of end of year things, so we'll coordinate calendars and be happy to share.
I don't know if this is a good idea or bad, but it just made me think of field day, how all of our elementary schools do field day. I don't know if that is a great time to integrate, and it would be terrible, but it certainly would be memorable. So I'm not even proposing it. It just came into my head, and sometimes, I don't know, but.
You have a teacher saying no.
Okay, never mind. So it's a terrible idea. This is why I don't talk off the cuff very often. I'm sorry, so don't do
Thank you,
that.
teachers, for your input.
Okay, and then I thought back to last year when we were looking through this redistrict process, and a family I spoke with, they were a military family, they had just moved here about a year ago, and their daughter, who moves quite a bit because of the family lifestyle, gave us some really fantastic ideas. I have the email still, so I'll share that again, but just off the top of my head, she talked about a buddy program at our schools where you have like a leader inside of each classroom who sort of helps welcome new students into the room, and just some other really unique ideas that she's done as someone that moves a lot. So I think that could be something that the committee and admin could look at as well, especially because it's come from a student. So I retract the field day. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Wetzel. Anything else from the committee? Ms. Mulrennan?
Thank you, Madam Chair. If I could, I did jot down a couple of questions. I don't want the answers this evening. I just want the admin to make note of them for the following meetings. Obviously, Sanborn, I guess, are they doing the survey? Are we doing the survey? Question is, when will the surveys go out? Again, to Mr. Austin's point, how long will they get back to us? Not next week, but the following week is vacation. People have lives. So I like to make sure that when the surveys go out, they come back in a timely manner and they get addressed. The public presentation, I've said it before, it was mentioned again tonight. The 28th, in person at the high school, wonderful. The 29th, remotely. That's still not enough for me to have us come back in a few nights and vote on a plan, but we'll see what happens there. Again, we have a great advisory group. I want to thank all the members of the advisory group that emailed Jesse. She's tabulating a whole flow chart of your questions and concerns, as well as the general public concerns, so you're not being forgotten. Your emails are being filed with Jesse, and hopefully we'll get some of those answers in the near future. But I don't see a lot of multi-language learners, multi-language information getting to those families in our community. And I don't know how the admin can do that. I know, to Mr. Austin's point, you want to answer, Dr. Harley?
Yeah, so the reason we send everything out in a s'more is it translates.
Right away.
Right away.
All right.
And so, so we send it via Remind and on a s'more. And so when people set up Remind, they can they get a text message in typically their home language, and then the document on the s'more translates.
And again, to Mr. Austin's point, I know all the principals are doing that. I appreciate all your newsletters, but we don't know if they're getting them. We know they're getting sent out, but has that family received them and understand them? That's for another time. I see our Woburn Teachers Association back there. Chrissy's back there. The concerns about staff perhaps getting moved, classrooms here, classrooms there. Those concerns have to be brought forward to this board, as well as concerns to the WTA. Recently, the CPAC had a great college fair at the high school, transition fair. CPAC, again, the concerns of the vulnerable learners there, the CPAC concerns, can they get notified of, where we're at, what we're doing as well, so they're up to date, and he can as well promote what we're doing and get the message out to the CPAC members. It was brought up tonight, I think a couple of speakers talked about before and after school programs. I know a lot of the buses are going down to the Boys and Girls Club, and it's a great program. Hopefully that can be incorporated to each and every school. If your student ends up getting moved, they can enjoy the activities down at the club. Again, we're hearing tonight that the buses aren't really needed. I know as a former bus driver, sometimes parents said, we really need a bus here because it's a safety issue. Obviously, I know the admin's answer will be, if it's brought to the school committee and it's a safety issue, it'll be brought to the police, they'll look at it, and that will become a route. Although tonight's hoping it's just going to be a wash, one school for the other. But again, if it's a dangerous situation, it has to be addressed. To Mr. Dillon's point, again, we have to add a couple of routes, we have to add them. The fifth grade option has been discussed. The IEPs and those special needs students, Ms. Ryan, Dr. Ryan, I'm not sure if this will change any of our Title I schools. Again, plug in the kids, where they're going to go if they get moved. Does anybody's school change that status, perhaps? Where am I? Here I go. A few things more. Again, we have lots and lots of unanswered questions, as we did last year at this time. We are better off. We're down to a couple of maps. We're trying to get these maps streamlined to get to an end map. That's our goal, to have an end map, phase it in, don't phase it in, pick a map, and get to an end map. It's still a lot of unanswered questions. We heard some tonight. Well, hopefully the advisory group, with the help of Mr. Lipset and Ms. Wetzel, will get together again. And I know she's been out to lots of PTOs, spreading the message and getting the word and getting the input, as well as getting the input via email to the administration and to all our members. I just hope that all these answers to some of these questions and concerns can be addressed before we make a final decision or a final vote. And again, I want to thank the principals for being here, all the speakers this evening, and all the emails we received. It's not an easy decision. It's a thoughtful decision, and it's not going to be easy, and someone may or may not have to get moved and move on from there. So I hope everybody understands that as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Mulrennan.
I just wanted to address, I know there's been 2 questions regarding it, and I don't want to speak for Ms. Nickerson, even though that she's in the crowd. We have been in conversation regarding the teacher assignments and have been working on that process. I will say that we are, and as we'll talk about in the budget process, we have a lot of retirements within the elementary schools this year. So in terms of like actual movement versus the number of staff, again, we're preparing for kind of any conversations that we need to start having, but we've been in communication about this for quite a few weeks now, and so I feel pretty comfortable that we've been working through that.
Great, I appreciate that as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Assistant Superintendent Young. I just had a question. Do we have any early indicators regarding kindergarten enrollment that is exceeding or meeting last year's?
We pulled that this morning, which is why.
Okay.
And it varied dramatically by school.
Oh, okay, okay.
Not any numbers I would use to project any information.
Right, okay.
Yes.
And if I'm not mistaken, the actual registration is May 6th?
No, so the May 6th is our kindergarten orientation evening at the high school.
Oh, okay.
For all incoming kindergarten students. We're going to, same process that we used last year, where all of the elementary principals will be there, and we also will have different organizations there. It was a great success last year. We're able to provide a lot of different services that evening, so it's definitely more inclusive and equitable. So we look forward to doing that again. And again, if we can, it's great for us to know kind of where students will be headed for that evening.
But I guess my previous question was, there's nothing in the data that's relevant for the school committee's decision about the early indicators in kindergarten enrollment.
Other than needing a centralized registration,
okay.
I would say that the data would not point us towards anything other than that.
And that's my second question, if I may. you indicated that at some point to deal with map maintenance or unexpected growth, particularly in West Woburn, let's just say it. Do we need, we would need, what? I'm sorry.
want to deliberate?
I don't know, I think I'm asking a question.
Yeah, all right.
You
Do
have
you
other
want
questions
to-
too, though, right? You want to do other guys?
I'll take,
Let's do it.
I'll pass the chair.
Just so you can ramble too.
Of course, yeah, I'll ramble. So I guess my question is, what I'm concerned about, now that I can opine, is the fact that the Reeves is the only school on the west side, and so the nearest school is the Harold Wyman, so I'm always looking at the West Woburn numbers, and the ECP being there, and the growth in West Woburn, what I expect to be growth. So my question is, if there needs to be a gray area in the west side, I would expect that we would need some sort of central registration or way in which learners, we could assign learners to different placements based on space issues.
I mean, I certainly, everyone can jump in, and I know the elementary principals who won't speak would all nod in agreement, that I think that the lack of centralized registration makes many different components, especially considering this redistricting part, very difficult. I think that we have been discussing the need for a centralized registration for a while. I think that this has exacerbated the need for centralized registration. I think that given that when we're looking at the number of students who have enrolled for rising kindergarten right now, that I think that when we talk about like the inequities and subgroup populations and the students who are enrolling right now, and those who we have not heard from yet, and the buildings that have more difficulty getting those numbers started, I think it's very difficult for us to plan. And I think this is why every summer we're constantly looking at kindergarten numbers, because we don't know the number of kindergartens that we'll need until very late into the summer. I think there's a lot of different reasons, but I think that this is, and one of the things when you're talking about kind of why we're using the numbers we have now versus kind of moving them up, one of those reasons is that we don't have kindergarten numbers that we could use right now.
Thank you, I really appreciate that.
Yes, we are well past time for being central registration. It would save a lot of headaches, and it would give us much, much more accurate information at considerably earlier in the school year. There are so many reasons.
We are working harder, not smarter, on this.
And I expect that the data and a centralized registration, I guess I mean, I don't want to say it would be more accurate, but there'd be something about.
Yes, you could say.
It would, okay. So then if we're talking about data being more accurate, then we are talking about dollars, and we are talking about grant funding and Chapter 70 and all of those things that literally make the lights stay on.
You have a lot of people who are having to go back into our registration after and are having to do a lot of kind of fixing work, and so like I think about, again, like when we're utilizing our resources, these are individuals whose that is not their role, and they're not doing a lot of other things because they're going through to make sure that our data is correct. And I also think that it's a very cumbersome on buildings. Yes.
And then I'm thinking about like the the procedural issues around McKinney-Vento and child need and getting records from previous, okay. So I'm convinced that we need central registration. But I guess what I'm thinking about in terms of redistricting is also building an infrastructure that supports the changes that we're making as well. So we're not just, again, moving learners around, which I know is very, very difficult. And it's actually very heartbreaking for me. But also to build something that's going to be system-wide and systemic to support it as well. So that's kind of thought number one. And then in that thought process of things that I said, I just want the community to be aware that I think of Woburn in regions, and I keep my eye on West Woburn, because to have a learner unexpectedly move into the Reeves region is a pretty far drive to the nearest school, so I like to consider regions together. And some maps make more sense to me in that regard. And I think that's, we need universal ECP for all learners, age 3 and 4 in the entire city of Woburn for free. So we need that as well.
Full day.
And Full day, yes. And then my last thought is, I think what we're really learning is that we're really stuck with the space confinements of the Woburn Public Schools, and we desperately need more space. And so I hope that the city is ready to support a robust building project. I'm talking like circa 2000, 2022, Reeves, Shamrock, Malcolm White High School. We built those buildings in succession because we have 4 needy buildings, and it's not just one building, it's 3. So I think that this is also bringing forward those changes as well, and so I think a lot of things are bubbling over and really improving for the city of Woburn and the learners in our district. I also want to thank the principals because I put together the slideshow for the city council presentation, and the information you gave me was invaluable, but it was very difficult to process through, to hear about what the conditions are in certain buildings and how learners are learning skilled instruction and specially designed instruction while sharing the room with other learners and educators. And so I just want to thank you for the resilience that you've done and the movements that you made. I know Ms. Maloney's not here, but her in particular, chasing around classrooms on a day-to-day basis, and also you, Principal Patrici. So I'm deeply grateful that you endured through this and supported us and gave us answers to our questions as we continued to make these deliberations. So thank you, and thank you for being here tonight. So that's all I have.
Oh, good. There you
Vice
go.
Chair Chisholm.
You can have it back. I didn't even have to gavel you. I'm very impressed.
Okay, I'm back. And the meeting is actually not over.
Can I ask a question, actually?
Of course you can, Ms. Cormier.
Thank you. I don't know if this topic is taboo, but the modulars. I'm wondering if that is still a conversation we can continue to have with the city, and not necessarily for September, but I know that Nauset was, motivated seller of these and wanted to get them off their lot, and if this, if there was a potential, based on the feedback we got from the city council, I would assume that the mayor would request that the building inspector would go down and check them out, and maybe they would want to encourage us to do a study of where these things would go. So while this wouldn't be for September, this is still something that they may be encouraged to invest in, I wonder, and so I'm hoping it's not completely off the table, and if there's any feedback on that.
Ms. Wetzel?
I have a thought on that, too. I think if that was something we would like to entertain, if you think about it from a monetary perspective, we would be spending substantially less if we were just looking to purchase the modulars and do a soil study, I think was $30K, if I remember, and then finding a place for those to be housed prior to then preparing a renovation and the other things that would cost more money. So it would be less of a lift for the city if that was something that we would like to consider. But I do also want people to understand, too, if that is something, then it would make these maps that we're talking about here, we would get to an in-map faster, and we would have to think about that in consideration as well. So just food for thought.
Well, I think I can answer just factually that we started talking to the mayor about modulars, Chair Lipset and I, in January and February, and reasonably, he wanted us to get not approval from the council, but to get support from the council regarding the modulars. And so it was a little backwards procedurally. And so we tried to get that support, and I think there needs to be other work done. And so we're on that task. But I think at some point we might need them with a capital N. I think we have a capital N now, but I think that I believe that it's still out there.
So ironically, I got an email yesterday from Nauset Public Schools asking where we were in the process. So I'm assuming that they're still available, but I think to what was just said,
Yeah.
we'd have to make a decision
Like yesterday.
now.
Right, because they need to get rid of them, and
Right.
that is part of the, right.
Right.
Understood.
And as I've said before, during this, like, the way to do the redistrict and to provide the most long-term sustainability is to do the modulars. I've said that in this meeting. I know that the quote of $5 million is a lot of money. I'm not dismissive of $5 million. I don't, but I think that it would have provided the schools a bridge, if you will, to get to whether it's the North Woburn School first or the mega middle school with the ECP attached. And so I get, I respect the process and the council and everything else, but that's kind of where it is right now.
Yeah. Because I'm thinking even like, it's not rushing through the installation and all that. It's not a time crunch. And then, you could start putting some classes from a pre-K and starting to sort of tease that all out. It would be more of a kind of a relaxed rollout. At least get the approval. And I know NASET probably has a timeline they need to get them out by, right?
I haven't really.
I feel like that was a thing. I don't know if I made that up.
Well, they need them through June.
Right.
And so
Are they taking up any space that they need, like parking or anything like that, or no?
If I could.
Yes, please.
So when we toured, they do need them through the end of June because they're using them as part of their high school. The renovation of their high school will be done, and then they will not need them. So what they plan to do if they can't find a seller is to demolish them just from up here. They don't need them on the grounds anymore. They don't want to keep them up and running, which would actually need to be something else we would think about. Because if you're not, they have to be used. Even if there's not someone in them, you have to make sure you're just like a house. You can't leave them empty.
Right.
So you do have to have power and stuff to them, and they don't want to spend money on that if they don't need them anymore.
Yep.
So they would get rid of them by demolition likely.
Well, thank you for asking that, Ms. Cormier. It's an important question. But I think we're proceeding with the understanding that we do not have them. Certainly not.
Yes,
We
nope.
don't have any support to procure them
Right.
at
No,
this point.
not assuming anything
Just
for
fine.
the 25-26 school year.
Yeah. Anything else?
If that's all on this topic, could we go for a 5-minute recess? We could. Prior to moving on? I will make that motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
We are in recess.
Right.
You just
steadily towards the next agenda item, which is the school committee budget fiscal year 2026. I believe you have an update for us, Dr. Crowley.
Yeah, it's more, I have an update. It's not a presentation necessarily, anticipating the time of night. And I will expect that we'll talk about a specific meeting dedicated to budget at some point in the very near future. So where we were at the last school committee meeting was a 7.65% budget, which is an increase of $6.9 million from FY25 to FY26. Since that meeting, we have had a meeting down at City Hall with the mayor and some city councilors, the leadership team here, and talked through how our budget was composed, what were the driving factors in the budget, and one of the questions that was asked there, and I'll say it here, is what's the roll forward number from FY25 to FY26? So the answer there is 5.6%. So that, again, just to take the staff that existed on July 1st.
Keep going. Yep. Yeah.
So the staff that existed on July 1st of 24 rather, when we started this fiscal year, to roll that group forward is 5.6%. We've added positions this year because of need, as the committee knows. And so if we add those positions in, that 5.6% goes to 6.4%. And then if you add in contractual obligations, whether that's transportation, out-of-district tuitions, et cetera, we are at 7.6%. So ironically, it's the same number that we spoke to at the last school committee meeting. With that being said, the conversation at City Hall was collaborative, productive. A lot of questions about reallocation of different ideas, whether it's funds for stipends or reallocation of positions, retirements, asking us to really look under every single rock to identify any savings. And so the request when we left City Hall was we were at a $6.9 million per dollar increase, and to try to find, or not find, but to reduce to a $5.9 million increase. And that was the meeting that we had at City Hall. Subsequently, we have met. We have identified some savings, but we are at a point really where, and this is why we need to have another meeting, what all of us desperately don't want to do is to, we want to maintain where we are and move forward and not go backwards. And so we are trying to not, to avoid any people being involved as it relates to a budget shortfall or a budget adjustment. And so that's where we are in the process. And as far as transparency goes, I kept this up here because it was a reminder. If you go to the Woburn Public Schools website, there's our bubble. It comes, kindergarten registration is alive and well. You can dismiss it, which we will. And then under district departments, under finance,
Should be a picture of a money tree. Oh, no.
all of our budget, operating budgets are here. Everything is, we're trying to be as transparent and open as possible. So again, just for the school committee and for the public to know that all of these documents exist. And so that we have another meeting scheduled with the mayor to further review where we are. It's actually a week from Wednesday. And we'll schedule a finance subcommittee meeting
Yep, before.
pretty soon.
Yep.
But that's that's where we are. So I know that Mr. Dizio has been working hard to get these numbers in real time when asked. He has a lot of supporting documents behind the percentages, but happy to answer any questions people have.
Anyone have any questions for administration on that budget update? Mr. Mulrennan?
Yeah, Dr. Colley, if you could just back up a little bit on that, just again to remind the public that a lot of those are obligated, required budget items. If you just want to go over a couple of those, so I know they come up every year, and how come that's so high? What about this one? And if you just had those at the tip of your tongue there, just to relay that to the public that there's not a lot of fluff here. So.
No, there's not a lot of fluff. I'd say a lot of them are contractually obligated, and some are legally mandated. So the contractually obligated goes to class size, legally mandated goes to IEP services, and so a lot of times when students move in, or we add this year, for example, a gain teacher, because the numbers at the Goodyear increased during the course of the year. Those are things that happen beyond July 1 that we have to meet those needs.
And again, a reminder to the public that, they come and go, and, Dr. Ryan brings it up to us, the numbers are what they are today, they could change again tomorrow, but I think that, the point is that, these are always changing, but yet we don't want those students or those children to go elsewhere. If we can provide the services here in town, we'd like to keep them in the community schools. So another great point of the public, probably doesn't get that message out, but I want to make sure that that's heard to the public as well. Thank you.
Well, to your comment, I think we heard that tonight. I think people are pretty happy with the education that they're receiving at their schools and the services they're getting. But beyond that, one of the things that I give Dr. Ryan credit, but it costs money to keep students here, but it's cheaper than sending them out of district, and so it's an investment in Woburn. So I am grateful for that sort of proactive fiscal lens.
Sounds like Dr. Ryan wants to respond to in-district programming in the district.
A couple of things. First is, I think, part of the investment that the city made last year with our school budget is we have strong programs, and we are keeping students here and doing a nice job educating them. The high school GAIN program is very successful. The Goodyear program at the GAIN is one of the areas where we had to add a teacher this year, and we've had a very successful year. Our students are doing well in district, and to that end, the out-of-district tuitions, the students that are out of district, the same tuition, I want to say, was roughly around an 8% increase. It was fairly substantial this year. But our actual out-of-district budget line is not going up that much because we've really been able to educate our students here in the least restrictive setting. And our teachers have worked very hard. We were able to hire and retain some very skilled staff. And I think, that within the Woburn Public Schools, we're doing a really nice job with that. And so our out-of-district numbers and our out-of-district tuitions are not creating a significant problem for the budget this year. The one area that I would note is the transportation has a $900,000 increase built into the budget. That is contractual, and that is a fairly substantial increase that there just isn't anything we can do about it. But so that's one of the line items, and when you see the percentage hike up, that's probably one of the best examples. $900,000 for an increase in special education transportation is fairly significant, especially when it's a fairly level number of students that are going out. So,
thank you, Dr. Ryan. Mr. Mulrennan.
And one final thing, Madam Chair, is kind of echo what Ms. Chisholm said. When the time comes, we're going to need the same support we're getting for redistricting for our budget. Down at City Hall, the public hearing here, a couple of meetings from now, we're going to be trying to get the monies that we need. We want to hear from the public. We want to hear from the folks. Again, we heard every speaker tonight, what a great education our students are getting each and every day, and that costs money, as Dr. Crowley indicated. So we're going to need, once again, the support of the public if and when the time comes here and as well as City Hall. So thank you.
Mr. Lipsick?
So this is obviously, I mean, I think very, very concerning. And I appreciate all the work that admin has done, Chair Crowley that you've done, Ms. Chisholm that you've done to communicate the needs of this district, the needs of this budget. I sit on Finance Subcommittee. We've been going through this budget with a fine-tooth comb. We have been, and admin has done admirable work in finding savings. Mr. Dizio went through, as has been requested, went through this budget and went through school line items, line item by line item, in a painstaking process to find every available reduction that we could. And this was done in good faith because we know that we have that fiscal responsibility to the taxpayers. We know that the mayor, that the city council are going to be looking for that kind of work. And I'm deeply appreciative of the work that's been done. I'm surprised to hear the number that I've heard, given the work that we've done, given the transparency that we've had, given the collaboration that we have done over the course of this year that was asked for by the mayor, that was asked for by the council. We have been attending city meetings. We have been opening our books more. And I would say this committee's financial process is transparent. We have regular finance subcommittee. I hear President Dillon in public comment tonight talking about how council members go through the spending. We do that. That is a thing that the finance subcommittee does on a regular basis. Not just one by one, but together as a committee, discussing, asking questions, gathering feedback, thinking about the impact. So I'm very concerned by this number. And I can't help but look around to our neighbors, to other communities. I'm looking at Stoneham right now, and I'm seeing that a move towards, I guess we call it fiscal responsibility, in the rejection of an override is potentially now going to cost that town a public library and a senior center. Saving money at the outset doesn't always have a public benefit. I recognize the impact to taxpayers, but I also think we need to consider, and the city needs to consider, the impact that this is going to have on the city itself. Right? That a reduction of this magnitude, and I understand that work is still being done, conversations are still being had, and I hope that they are productive, and I hope that we are able to find the savings that will allow the mayor to move forward, that will allow the council to accept it. But I think we need to be very careful in terms of how we talk about fiscal responsibility here. We have a duty to the taxpayers. Yes, we also have a duty to the children of Woburn, to our staff, to our people. And this kind of number threatens that. And so, I want us to look at the big picture. I want us to look, and I'm not saying us, this committee, because I know that we do. I'm saying us as a city. We need to look at the big picture in terms of what it means to save $1 million. What is that actually going to mean to a taxpayer? But on the other hand, what is it going to mean to our kids? What is it going to mean to our staff? I think that scale is not in balance. I think that amount means a lot more to the people in our schools than it might to an individual taxpayer, and I'm speaking here as an individual taxpayer. So I hope that those are the thoughts that are out there for our council, for our mayor, and for our community listening to this and thinking about what they need to advocate for, because $1 billion is not an easy thing to find, and we heard Edmund say, we're trying to do this without losing people. $1 million is hard to do given our current situation without losing people. So that I hope for, and I am looking forward to, a collaborative process that allows us to make an agreement that avoids the worst. But I wanted to say my piece on that.
Thank you, Mr. Lipset. That was exceptional. Anything else with the administration with regards to the budget update? On that, I'm going to pose that we meet next week to have a meeting directly on the budget. I know having a lot of meetings, but.
It's like old times.
Just like
I remember
times.
that schedule.
That's right. So I would like to have a meeting on, I'll start with April 16th.
Budget only, Madam Chair?
Yes, we have some other business too, that is an executive session.
7 PM?
Yes.
Works for
It
me.
might be tight, but I'll make it work.
I can do the 16th.
Thank you, thank you. Vice Chair Chisholm, do you want a different time, or I don't want it to be?
No,
tight?
I'll just make it work. I'll have to pull in the resources. I'll have to go the bullpen on this one.
Oh,
Okay.
we're going to do finance beforehand, right, Pat?
We're doing finance on Monday or Tuesday.
Yeah, so.
All right, so let's have it on the 16th.
I can't do the 16th.
Oh, okay.
What about earlier today? Is that possible or no?
No.
Not for a regular meeting. That's a good
Yeah,
suggestion.
What about Tuesday, Monday?
Well, we want to have finance first, and then you're meeting with the mayor on Wednesday, so it's better to have it after he has spoken with him.
Thursday?
I can't do Thursdays.
All right,
That's right,
so
that's
then
right,
we're going to have
James.
to stick to You can keep it on the 16th.
Keep
Can you
the
zoom
16th.
in?
Yeah, I'll try to move some stuff around.
Yeah.
Are you comfortable with that, James?
Yeah, I'm fine with it. I may not be able to make it, but I'll try to move some things around so I
Okay,
can be there.
all
for that
right.
meeting.
Which one, 16th or 7th? Which one's better?
16th.
We'll do the 16th.
Can't do 17th.
17th is a definite no.
16th,
16th, maybe.
16th would be more doable.
Okay. All right, I appreciate your patience, James. So we'll set that for the 16th.
We'll make a motion, Chairperson, set up a meeting for Wednesday, the 16th.
Just budget.
Budget and executive session matters? or you
Yes. I mean, I'll post the agenda, but I anticipate it'll be directly about budget, and there's an executive session. Okay, so do I second?
Yep.
Does that work?
On the motion, Dr. Crowley?
No, nothing.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, that meeting will be on April 16th, 2025, 7 PM. Do you want to have it here? Sorry. Okay.
No?
Is there anything more on the development of the school committee budget fiscal year 26 update, Dr. Crowley?
No, but we will have a full presentation for next week.
Okay, I appreciate that. All right, we are voting on the last day of school. This is something that we do in April because they're,
I didn't touch this, which is probably better.
Even though it snowed today?
I am
Yeah.
not, I am not, this is not what I said.
I'm sorry, oh,
So
I thought Superintendent Young was saying that she was.
No, we.
Oh, no. I'm not going to predict and count the days. I have to do it once a year.
Okay.
I do it once a year, and Pat has to check me. It's usually wrong. Yeah.
Okay.
No, Dr. Crowley's got this one.
Oh, got it, thank you. Okay.
I'm not sure when it is.
So we did have one snow day.
Okay.
So the official last day of school this year will be Monday, June 23rd. And
Okay.
That's a early release day.
All right, sounds like the last day of school will be Monday, June 23rd. Do I have a motion?
Motion to make Monday, the 23rd of June, the last day of school.
Early release. Second.
Any discussion on that motion? All in favor?
Aye.
That motion passes. June 23rd, 2025 will be the Woburn Public Schools' last day of school.
Yeah.
Just to,
course,
I
Mr. Lipset.
wanted to get a sense of when we might see a school calendar for 25, 26.
Soon.
Add that to your list.
Yeah.
Just keep
Not that you have anything else going on. Yeah.
Soon.
Yeah.
Very soon. Yes.
Okay.
So
Thank you, Superintendent
I
Young.
believe the 2nd of September is the Tuesday, so that would be when staff would report to work, but then we have to work out all the other details of the calendar.
I will. It is on my list. I will work to have it.
Thank you,
Thank
Superintendent
you
Young.
for that and all else that you do.
Yes.
Okay.
It is coming.
All right, and our second vote is to whether or not to implement school choice, which would allow non-Woburn students to attend Woburn Public Schools. It's permitted by law, and every year the school committee has to make a vote to approve school choice, meaning allowing children from other cities to attend Woburn Public Schools, or decline. So does the superintendent have a recommendation with regards to school choice for 2025, 2026?
I would recommend, based on a couple variables, that we do not
10 o'clock.
We do not support school choice for this upcoming school year.
I will make a motion that we do not support school choice in Woburn Public Schools for the upcoming school year.
Second.
Wait a minute, let's clarify the vote. The vote would be yes to decline it. Yes. Okay.
Right. I'll vote no, yeah.
I have a motion to not approve school choice for the Woburn Public Schools. And I have a second. Any discussion on that motion? All in favor?
Aye.
The ayes have it. Woburn Public Schools will not be implementing school choice. Okay.
In a shocking development.
But it's a mandated vote just
Yeah.
for the committee and public to know.
That was
We have to report to the state. that we
Absolutely.
had
No,
it.
that's good.
Much appreciated.
I'm all into it. All right, so I'm looking at the agenda members, and I'm looking at the time, and I know that there is one item in in a subcommittee that does need a vote. So I would like to take curriculum and data trends out of order and hear from Mr. Lipsett his minutes regarding curriculum. And then I would accept, after that, in our deliberation on that, I would be willing to accept a motion to table the rest of the agenda for our meeting, our next regular meeting, given the time and the constraints on administration who have worked all day.
Madam Chair, I would like to make a motion that we take curriculum and data trend subcommittee minutes out of order in the agenda and then dispose of the rest until the next meeting, regular meeting.
Okay.
Second.
Okay, yeah. I have a motion to take curriculum out of order and then table the rest of the agenda, and I have a second. Any discussion on that motion? All in favor?
Aye.
That motion passes, so we will first hear from Mr. Lipsett with regards to his minutes in curriculum, and we'll take any action as you recommend from yourself.
It will be as brief as I can. The Curriculum and Data Trends Subcommittee met on March 6th at 3 o'clock in this room. In attendance were Assistant Superintendent Young, ML Director Rania Caldwell, myself, Ms. Chisholm, and Ms. Wetzel. We reviewed a new multilingual learner curriculum update. This is, Ms. Caldwell presented a curriculum that the ML staff and administration have recommended adoption for elementary students, and I understand it has since also been adopted for middle school and high school students.
Same program.
This is curriculum that would be funded through a grant, so it is cost neutral to the committee at this time, which I imagine might be a good thing. It is National Geographic Reach Higher, and the middle school and high school versions have slightly different names, but it's basically the same curriculum,
Yes.
correct?
And it is the previous program that was used, but this is the revised, updated version to the new standards.
And this meets all state standards. This also meets our tiered focus monitoring recommendations. It comes with the recommendations of staff and administration. And so the curriculum subcommittee, and I'm trying to rush through, so tell me if there's anything else the committee needs to know. But the curriculum subcommittee did recommend the purchase of this curriculum through grant funding to the full committee by unanimous vote. So I would ask for, I guess, a motion to adopt this curriculum for elementary, middle, and high school.
I will make that motion, and it is called what?
National Geographic Reach Higher.
I will make a motion that we adopt National Geographic Reach Higher for those schools.
ESL curriculum.
Yeah, all levels. Yeah.
Okay.
Second.
Could you just go over what the advantages are, just for the record?
Sure, and here I'll
Yeah.
turn it over to Ms. Young. But.
Yeah. So one of the recommendations that we had out of the TFM was that we needed to adopt high-quality instructional materials for ESL, and the previous edition for REACH no longer met the requirements for high-quality instructional materials. We looked at the National Geographic program as well as 3 others, and it was a unanimous vote within the department to adopt the new version of the National Geographic. And the WIDA standards, which is what we use as our standards for language acquisition in ESL, descriptors in the state of Massachusetts. It has been realigned to the new updated version of those standards. And so there are updates related to the learning targets in terms of the amount that's the requirements related to speaking, reading, writing, listening, all the factors related with the ESL curriculum.
Thank you so much for that. Okay.
Sure.
Are there any any further discussion on that motion? Seeing none, all.
Sorry, I was just going to say, so as part of this, because we had this finding through the TFM, Ms. Caldwell had applied for a grant and had received a considerable amount, which we are very fortunate, will cover the entire cost of a brand new K-12 curriculum. And I'm just saying that as in the sense of like, it was a tremendous amount. We were very fortunate to get it. And it's also, as you'll see kind of represented in the budgeting process, it also allowed us to take the budget line item down of the ML department for next year substantially, given that we're able to use the grant funding now to buy new curriculum.
Thank you for that information.
Yeah.
Any further deliberation on this motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Ayes have it. Okay, so that passes.
I'm happy to table the rest of my minutes.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Lipset. And before I close, are there any other minutes that people need the other committee members to hear? No, so we're all, okay. So I guess the rest of our agenda is tabled. I want to announce to the public that executive session was on the agenda. We will not be moving into executive session.
Okay.
So there's no confusion. So I will accept a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
This meeting's adjourned.
And no smoking.